Hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Enjoy the fanfic, and let's begin part 10. Naruto's chakra surged across the field of battle as the dust picked up from Mirai's body slamming into a boulder. Ryu, Alma, and Rachel were all pleasantly surprised by Naruto's simple attack, and while Ryu hit it better, it was more than enough for them all to forget that corny joke that Naruto had said aloud. Naruto loosened his grip on his sword and took in a fresh breath of air. He felt good. No, he felt great. Kyuubi's controlled chakra surging through his body and his kidetsu in his hands. He would protect Alma. He would protect the fiends. He would help Rachel and Ryu. He would do it all if he had to, but he wouldn't lose. No, not like this. Well, Ryu, are you going to stand there or are you going to help me? Naruto asked, not taking his eyes off the large crater that he had just buried Mirai into. Ryu merely walked forward away from the two blonde females and slowly unsheathed his sword. He stood next to Naruto, his spirit unyielding in its fire for vengeance against his former surrogate family. Ryu hardened his emotions and his face and took his own stance next to Naruto. Let's get ready, Ryu said, and just like that Naruto nodded his head and the two watched as the rock in front of them exploded in dark energy. Mirai jumped out into the air and with a shout his demonic energy surged as he landed on the ground. Not bad, Konoha ninja. That tickled a little, but I don't have the time to play games with you. You two and those two females will be bloodstains on my blade, Mirai said like it was fact, and he charged at Naruto first, a little payback for that earlier hit. Naruto would have reacted instantly if he hadn't seen Ryu's dragon sword slam into the dark dragon blade. The two sword energies rose into the air and Ryu glared at his uncle. You have fallen off the path of the true ninja. You have allowed your soul to be corrupted by the power of the dark dragon blade. The only path for you is death, Ryu asserted while Mirai glared at him. He then turned his eyes to see Naruto jump above Ryu's form. He brought the kidetsu back and growled as he slashed down in an attempt to cut Mirai down. The Shadow Ninja clan leader quickly backflipped away from Naruto and Ryu while the two turned to each other. They nodded and both blurred out in speed. Mirai did the same and Alma and Rachel were treated to the sight and sounds of swords clashing left and right. Only streaks of light having anything to look at. The encounter ended with a cough from Naruto, who was kicked by Mirai and sent sliding across the plains. He grunted and touched his stomach before he saw Ryu and Mirai still clashing. He then noticed Mirai open his left hand and dark blue shuriken formed instantly. Ryu, watch out, Naruto shouted as he sent out his hand. He saw a red arm reach out from his Kyuubi cloak and grab Ryu's back. The dragon ninja didn't seem surprised and just let himself get grabbed. Naruto pulled him away and it was then that Ryu saw the materialized shadow shuriken nearly cut his face off. Naruto pulled Ryu back to him and with him safe, Naruto flashed through a long set of hand signs before he ultimately ended. Futon. K's no Yaba, wind release. Wind blades technique, Naruto shouted, and the area was covered in wind swords as they converged on Mirai. The enemy shinobi countered as he swung his sword fast, cutting through each set of wind's blades effortlessly. He felt this was some sort of joke that the two were playing on him. This was almost too easy. Mirai turned back to the two and he noticed Naruto in front of Ryu. You two are boring me. Tell me this isn't all you can do. Mirai asked and Naruto grinned mischievously. He quickly threw his kodachi into the air, making Alma, Rachel and Mirai look up. It was only then that he looked down did he notice Naruto had blurred and appeared in front of him. Mirai widened his eyes and it seemed like the lightning coursing through Naruto's kidetsu. The blonde was this close to completing his mission. He wouldn't lose to something like this. Gotcha, Naruto said as he swung the long sword at Mirai. Much to his annoyance, Mirai managed a counter of his sword and it was then that he noticed his mistake and looked out to see Ryu overhead. He had grabbed Naruto's two swords and with accurate precision he slammed them into Mirai's shoulders, getting a yell of pain from the man before he rolled away. Ryu then threw a wire and wrapped the wires together. I have it done, Naruto, Ryu shouted, and Mirai turned back to Naruto, who was smirking. The blonde tucked in his body quickly swept Mirai off his feet with a kick. Mirai widened his eyes to being off the earth while Naruto held up his sword. Everyone watched as the kidetsu pierced his body and Mirai landed on top of Naruto. The blonde then held up a hand sign and muffled a shout. Kai! Naruto shouted as he exploded, damaging Mirai's back. Ryu glared and he brought his dragon sword back into his hands. Just in time to as he blocked a heavy sword strike from Mirai that seemed to make the ground beneath him crack. Ryu glared evenly at the man before he looked to see Naruto still in the crater. The blonde coughed and rose to his feet. He shook his head and looked to see Ryu just deliver an up kick to Mirai's chin, sending the man back. Naruto growled and quickly weaved more hand signs. Genjutsu. Kokuongyo no Jutsu, bringer of darkness technique, Naruto shouted, and immediately the darkness surrounded Mirai as he watched Ryu disappeared. Mirai widened his eyes and looked left and right before smiling. You are a fool to want to wish to fight in the darkness. You are even more of a fool to think that a ninja doesn't know how to fight with his senses hindered. This will be over soon, Mirai said as he closed his eyes. His nose whiffed and his ears twitched to the sounds of moving feet. He turned his head to the left and in a flash of speed he slammed into something. Mirai opened his eyes and smirked at Naruto's shocked face. His sword pierced the young blonde's body as it came out the other end. Ryu widened his, as did Alma and Rachel. Naruto's cloak dissipated and his body dropped to the ground. HMPH. Too easy, he said as he picked up Naruto and threw the blonde over to Ryu. Ryu knelt down and Naruto whispered something into his ears. Such is the life of shinobi, Naruto said, and Ryu just nodded. He turned back to Mirai and walked slowly. Ryu blurred out of sight and he slammed his sword into Mirai's with much more vigor. Mirai chuckled as he watched Alma's blank expression. He figured she was in too much shock over the lose of her master, but that wasn't it at all. Naruto-sama, why are you just laying there? You know he missed, so why are you acting like he didn't? Alma wondered. That blood on Mirai's sword was previously dried blood from Naruto's encounter with Alma herself. She had wondered just what Naruto was planning. The blonde opened his eyes and grumbled. He then turned back to see Ryu still doing as Naruto had asked. The blonde smirked at Rachel and Alma before he backed away and held out his hand. He quickly held out his hand and the Rasengan began to form. It was a purplish color from the regular blue thanks to Kyuubi's chakra, and Naruto turned back to his sword. He then crashed the two together and the Rasengan quickly absorbed into the Kidetsu. The Kidetsu glowed brighter and Naruto grinned. One last shot. He added chakra to his feet and shouted. Ryu, back up. Naruto shouted as he blasted from his hiding place. The earth beneath him crumbled from the speed of his chakra while Ryu and Mirai registered his voice. What? That's not possible. I stabbed him through the stomach. He should be long dead. Mirai shouted before he looked back at Ryu. Konoha's shinobi have really interesting techniques. One such things is what they call a Kai Bunshin. A recent technique that Naruto has mastered. It will be the last that you see, Ryu said as he jumped into the air. Immediately Mirai brought his sword into a defensive position as Naruto's sword lunged forward. The Kidetsu and Dark Dragon blades slammed into each other and a large light flashed in front of everyone. Alma and Rachel covered their eyes while Ryu squinted his own. Mirai and Naruto roared in the light while Naruto shouted. You thought you killed me. I will not die. Not until I let the world know of the power of Genjutsu. I will not die until I have saved the fiends from all you corrupt asses. I will not die until I become Hokage. Naruto shouted and Mirai widened his eyes as the dark dragon blade was blasted from his hands. Ryu caught it in his hands while the light ended. Everyone noticed Mirai standing while Naruto right across from him, his Kidetsu in his hands. The light stopped glowing from the power of the Rasengan and settled back to its white lightning nature as a large slash appeared over Mirai's body. Mirai coughed and fell to the ground, dead. Damn right. Nothing can beat me. I ain't scared of no dark dragon. I'm Kyuubi. Yoko damn it. None compare to the awesomeness that is me. Kyuubi hollered while Nibi just stared at her husband with an amused expression while Naruto allowed the cloak to fall. His feature turned to normal while he sheathed his sword into its holder. He noticed the dark dragon blade at Ryu's feet and walked over to it. The two looked down at it, but Naruto broke the stare and turned back to Ryu. Not going to take it back to the Hayabusa village? Naruto asked and Ryu shook his head. This needs to be destroyed. Besides, I already have what we need, Ryu said, and Naruto noticed the demon statue in front of him. The talisman of the dark dragon, to be sealed with Ryu and his clan. I see. Well, it's not my choice, so that's fine, Naruto said and Ryu nodded. Naruto, In honor of our first mission together as well as its success, I would like it if you helped me destroy this, Ryu said, and Naruto smiled. He sighed and nodded. You got it, man. Despite the shit, it was fun, Dadbayo, Naruto said, and Ryu just stared at him evenly, but his eyes showed amusement of Naruto's words. Ryu tucked his left foot underneath the blade and quickly hurled it into the air. The blade shined in the sun before it came down, and as fast as they wanted, Naruto and Ryu slashed the demonic weapon with the Kidetsu and True Dragon sword. In their eyes, they could see the shiny black metal of the dark dragon blade fall to the ground and vanish. Naruto and Ryu then finally relaxed, and out of the corner of Naruto's eye, he saw Ayane smile with a nod, and she quickly raced off into the sunset. Naruto smiled and quickly rejoined with Alma and Rachel. It was only then that Naruto, next to Alma, noticed the way that Rachel and Ryu glanced at each other. The blonde raised an eyebrow and grinned inwardly. Whoa, when did this happen? I guess I'm not the only one that's into blondes, Naruto thought as he and Alma watched the reaction with smiles. The fiend hunter and dragon ninja just continued to stare for a bit before Ryu broke the gaze and turned around. Rachel widened her eyes and softened her eyes. Unknown to Naruto, the two had actually had an adventure together while the blonde was doing his own thing. Ryu, Rachel said before Ryu stopped. He turned around slightly and sighed. It is over, he said before he tossed a glare at Naruto. The blonde nodded his head and everyone noticed Ryu open his arms before he vanished away. Naruto smiled and shook his head lightly. Same old Ryu, too damn shy to say anything. Well, it looks like I have to go too, Naruto said, and the two blondes turned to him. Naruto noticed Alma was the most saddened at this while Naruto collected his Kodachi. Naruto-sama, Alma said, and Naruto chuckled despite himself. He was just a big softy when it came down to it. Naruto walked up to Alma and asked for her hand. Alma held it out and Naruto took out an ink brush. He wrote across it and Alma saw the seal of Naruto's spy network on her hand. Whenever you want to talk or just say hello, contact me with my summons. Also, Alma-chan, I would like it if you would keep me updated on this world. It's really fun and I really want to come here again, Naruto said, and Alma then brightened up. She nodded and then Naruto took out something else. He handed it to Alma and she took it. It was another seal with some paper. This is one made in Konoha. We call it a communication seal. With it we can listen over long, and I mean long, distances. I won't be far from you if you don't like snakes. Now will you stop making me sad with that face? Naruto asked, and Alma nodded again with a smile on her face while Naruto smiled back at her. He then turned to Rachel, who was looking off in the distance, and grinned again. Also Rachel, Naruto beckoned and Rachel turned around. She saw Naruto's weird smile and the blonde rubbed the back of his head. You know, there is a place in, what was it? Ah, Japan. Yeah, there is a place in Japan. A mountain, Mt. Fuji. You should go there with Alma sometime. You never know who might be there if you are willing to look, Naruto coded, and Rachel widened her eyes. Naruto and Alma saw the pink tint across her face and he noticed a warm smile on her face as she nodded. Naruto, seeing that this was no longer any more of his business, he then turned back to look at Alma and Rachel one more time and waved. The Hanyu fiend woman and fiend hunter waved goodbye to him and Naruto flashed through some hand signs and vanished in a fire and lightning shunshin, leaving the two there. Alma and Rachel turned to each other and Rachel smiled. Well, if you're going to be fiend hunting with me then you're going to need some new clothes, Rachel said, and Alma eyed her sister's attire. Like yours? She asked, and Alma regretted it as Rachel's smile widened. She just grabbed her sister and the two walked away in smiles. Thank you, Naruto-sama. Thank you for this one chance to be better. Thank you for reuniting me and my sister. Thank you for bringing me home, Alma said in her thoughts before the sisters disappeared as well. With Naruto. 1 week later. Everyone was gathered around as Naruto told the story of his mission. He had told it all while Ryu folded his arms. Momiji, who had returned with the children just a few days ago, listened to the story intently while Kasumi widened her eyes, and so did Hayate. It seemed that when Naruto finished, Kasumi decided to speak. You and Ayane kissed? Kasumi asked while Ayane grumbled with a blush. Naruto smiled with a nod while Hayate shook his head. Ryu did the same and some of the kids. At hearing that. I had my guard down. That was all. Nothing more, nothing less, Ayane countered, trying to not get any more embarrassed, and for Naruto that was really cute. Ah, don't act like you didn't do anything, Ayane-chan. Don't think I didn't feel you shudder at one point, Naruto said, and everyone glanced at Ayane, who growled. She then smacked Naruto over the head while the blonde chuckled. Ayane left the room while Naruto picked up his bag. So that it right. Konoha was able to relocate the portal and now Samui-chan controls it. Naruto asked, and Hayate nodded his head. Naruto smiled at the thought of Samui. It felt like such a long time since he had seen his fiancée. Well, Naruto-san, you are always welcome to the Mugen Tenshin clan as well as the Hayabusa village. We owe you a lot, Hayate told him, and Naruto just waved it off. You helped my village and I would help yours. We're friends after all, Naruto said, and while some of the kids were sad to see the mysterious blonde leave, over the week they had gotten attached to him, especially Sanji. The boy really reminded Naruto of Konohamaru. He was sure that the two would be good friends if they met. Yes, we're all friends, but it is still nice to have another friend's help. Oh, we'll also be attending the wedding of yours. Apparently that's what Hayate and I had to relay to Tusama. Something about fostering better relations between the areas, Kasumi said while Naruto raised an eyebrow. You guys know I'm engaged, yet you're not trying to beat me within an inch of my life for Ayane-chan. Naruto asked, confused, while Kasumi just smiled. Ayane is old enough, and stubborn enough, to make her own decisions. Also, so long as you and she know what you're getting into, then we have nothing to say. Besides, it's not unordinary for men to have more than one wife, Kasumi said, dropping a hint that Naruto did catch. He just smiled and nodded. Well, I had better get going. Hopefully I'll be able to come here again, Naruto said, and he opened a sliding door to the outside. Bye bye, Naruto-nichan. Kids shouted and Naruto waved goodbye. Hayate and Kasumi waved goodbye to him as well as Ryu before Naruto stopped. Oh hey, wait a minute. Momiji-chan, can you do something for me? Naruto asked, and Momiji raised an eyebrow, as did everyone else. Hayabusa Shrine. Everyone watched as Momiji danced around in a light blue kimono. On a pedestal was Naruto's newly owned Kidetsu, shimmering with its shiny metal around the candle lights. He still had to get a cleansing ceremony, which were Nibi's instructions. Momiji grabbed Naruto's sword and swung it around for a bit before she gently placed it inside a pool of spiritual water. The sword glowed brightly and rested inside the waters for a bit. It stayed that way for about 10 minutes before Momiji took a large necklace and took the ruby from the hilt of the Kidetsu. She dropped it in the fire of a statue's mouth while everyone stayed silent. The fire turned blue and Momiji reached her hand inside. The ruby now had a few shades of orange stripes added to it, and she attacked it to a necklace just like the dragon's eye for Ryu. She then grabbed the Kidetsu and held it before Naruto along with his ruby holding necklace. Done for you, Naruto-san. Your blade will be just fine from now on, Momiji stated, and Naruto picked up the sword and then the ruby. He smiled with a nod and sheathed his sword. The Biju's eye was this ruby. Fitting for the blade of the Biju after all. Thank you, Momiji-chan. I'll keep this safe, Naruto said, and one more time he waved goodbye to the others and walked along the trail in front of him. He hit the dirt road before he stopped again. I would like you to come too, Naruto said, and Ayane dropped down. I will. I wouldn't miss it, she said, and Naruto smiled with a nod. He quickly grabbed Ayane and kissed her again to her surprise. The Kunoichi and Konoha shinobi settled into each other's embrace, and Ayane shuddered as Naruto knew she would. Her arms rested on Naruto's shoulders and Naruto's hands rested on her waist. Ayane pushed her tongue into Naruto's mouth and the blonde didn't resist it, but welcomed it. It couldn't last long, so Ayane parted and Naruto did so as well. What will you tell her? Ayane asked, and Naruto smiled. She already knows, Naruto said, and Ayane widened her eyes before Naruto walked away. He hiked up the trail and looked back at the forest. He had quite a lot of fun there. No doubt it would be good to come here again. Feel Ayane's world, fight alongside Ryu, Hayate and Kasumi again. He just felt that it was so much fun to be here and he wasn't returning empty-handed. That samurai armor that he had would fetch a hefty sum, and so would some other things as well. Maybe he could sell them to Tenten's family, and maybe he could tell Tenten about Muramasa. She'd have a fit. Well, time to go. Let's go, Kidetsu. My blade, Naruto said as he passed through the portal. The light consumed him and his entire body. Konohagakure. Construction was the norm as people continued to work around the portal that had popped up behind the Hokage stone faces. Sarutobi had called for people to build the building in a hurry so that there wouldn't be any interruptions or happenings without him knowing it. That was what they were doing before, the portal cackled. People widened their eyes and backed away in fear of the mystic object before they all noticed a mop of blonde hair drop to the ground. Naruto stepped out of the portal and smiled at his village. It's good to be back, Naruto said before he looked at the many shocked faces of the people in front of him. He raised an eyebrow and his to the side. They just seemed to be staring at him up and down in shock before Naruto rolled his eyes and shunshined away. People stopped their beating hearts and sighed in relief. Things were going to be that much more troublesome if the Ice Fox was back in Konoha, but a few people would learn to like it. Hokage Mansion. Naruto knocked on the door and smiled when he heard the words. Come in, Sarutobi said, and Naruto opened the door. He noticed Joe, Shiden and Konoha in the room, and Naruto surprised everyone when he came through the door with a thumbs up. Mission accomplished, Gigi, Naruto said, and Sarutobi smiled. He was happy to see the young blonde Chunin back in his village again. It really warmed his heart while Joe stood to his feet. The dark dragon blade? He asked, and Naruto nodded. The blonde was more than happy to share this little tidbit of information with Joe Hayabusa, and Naruto proudly gave a thumbs up with a glimmering smile. Destroyed by Ryu and myself. Also, it turned out that Mirai of the Shadow Ninja clan was the reason for it being stolen in the first place, Naruto answered, and Joe narrowed his eyes. He sighed with a nod and sat down while everyone heard Naruto file his report to his village leader. Once that was done, Naruto turned to Konoha and gave her the necklace. Ryu says, "Thank you for looking out for him," Naruto said, and Konoha smiled with a nod as she wrapped the necklace around her body. Nice work, Chunin. Naruto. You have completed your very first A-rank mission. You've done well. Go home and rest for the week. Your team is back as well. So rest up from the long time, Sarutobi said, and Naruto nodded. He wasn't sure, but something sounded hesitant in his Gigi's words, but he would have to think about it later. Thank you, Gigi. Oh, is there any chance that you can give me a Doton-style user? Just for 30 minutes, Naruto said, and Sarutobi raised an eyebrow. He wondered what Naruto could want, but he just nodded, and in minutes a Chunin by the name Nanosaki appeared next to him. Naruto and Nanosaki left the room, and Sarutobi turned to Joe and Shiden. Well? Sarutobi asked, and Joe nodded indefinitely. The boy is among the various talents that I have seen of this village. At his age to be doing such things impresses me. I had a spar with the one named Kakashi Hatake, and it was drawn to a stalemate only because we were causing too much attention. If we had kept going, I'm sure that he would win, if because he lasts much longer. With your permission, I would like to enroll the children in your academy, Joe said, and Sarutobi nodded before turning to Shiden. I am too convinced. An alliance with you will benefit us all. I would like to request the same thing of you, Shiden spoke, and Sarutobi nodded his head again. Konoha will welcome them with open arms. I trust that if Konoha comes to your world that we will be welcomed. Hiruzen asked, and, getting to their feet, Joe and Shiden nodded their heads before they followed Konoha out of the room to go home. That was the only reason that they stayed, to hear the result of the mission and whether this was a good idea or not. Apparently it was, and they wouldn't have any regrets about it. With Naruto and Nanosaki quickly arrived towards the Namikaze compound. Naruto took out his keys and opened the door. He sighed in random relief before he unhooked his jacket and placed it in the closet. He then watched as Mikata unfurled from his waist and slithered to the ground. So what are you going to do? Naruto asked, and Mikata smiled before she slithered up the stairs towards the bedroom to curl up her body and sleep the day away since nothing else would be going on. Naruto shook his head left and right before sighing. He then turned to see Nanosaki waiting patiently for him before the blonde opened the back door to the porch. So what do you require of me? Nanosaki asked, and Naruto grinned while he looked at the open forest full of trees. She didn't really have much going on, but Nanosaki wanted to relax from a day of observing in the Konoha towers, and she didn't want to be disturbed. Yeah, sorry about that. I'll make this quick. Can you summon up a large oval stone wall? Large enough to be like a preserve? Naruto asked, and Nanosaki raised an eyebrow. How much land do you own? She asked, cracking her knuckles while Naruto responded. About 700 acres of land. Just past the village. I'd like a nice wall around it if that's not too much, Naruto said while Nanosaki snorted. Please, this is nothing. I hope, she said, keeping that last part to herself. Naruto watched Nanosaki flash through a load of hand signs before she slammed the ground. Doden. Motarasu Siki no Jutsu, Earth Release. Bringing about the sanctuary technique, Nanosaki shouted as Naruto felt the wave of chakra flow into the ground. He saw a large landmass away from the house rise up and quickly circle around the entire place, with only the house being the true means of escape. Since it was Naruto's land, he could do what he wanted with it and not even the Hokage could stop him. Naruto smiled and seemed satisfied with that. He could see a few streams, animals and other things might have been spooked by the sudden jutsu, but they were fine. A good food source and a nice place to rest out in the sun. Naruto nodded and ran along the ledges. They were too far for him to go fully, but that was fine. A large waterfall for water, a nice place of shade and appropriate sunlight. Tons of food to never go hungry and enough foliage that even fire wouldn't be able to alert or endanger the village. Naruto nodded to himself again and jumped to the ground. Thank you very much for your help. That was all I wanted, Naruto said, and Nanosaki raised an eyebrow. That was it? Yeah, well, you're welcome. See ya, Nanosaki said as she quickly left the area in a shunshin, looking to return to her bed and sleep. Even if the sun was still out, she had better things to do than worry about her fellow Chunin from another squad. Feeling that her chakra was gone and no one was around, Naruto grinned as he quickly bit his thumb and slammed the ground. Time to get you too. Kuchio's no jutsu, Naruto shouted as a seal appeared on the ground. A large poof came in front of him and Naruto smiled as Tenka and Mikomi appeared in front of him. The two had been hiding in Vigor that past week until Naruto would summon them to their new home. Sorry for the long wait. I hope you like your home, Naruto said, and the two fiends turned around. They glanced at the inside of the forest that Naruto made for them. Tenka growled lowly and pressed his face to Naruto's while the blonde smiled. He gently patted Tenka's head and the Gala fiend turned his head to Mikomi. She looked over the place and then turned back to Naruto. She quickly gave the blonde a lick on the cheek and Naruto watched as Tenka and Mikomi, in excitement he assumed, ran into the forest made for them and quickly disappeared with only a small roar from them to indicate their presence. Naruto chuckled before he heard the door slid open. The blonde turned around and the sight made him smile as he saw Samui in her regular clothes. Nice to see you again, Samui-chan, Naruto said, walking up to her. Samui walked down from the porch and lessened the distance between herself and Naruto before she grabbed his collar and pressed her lips to his own. Naruto widened his eyes to the initial contact before he closed his eyes. The two blondes sighed in the comfort of the other before parting. You were gone for quite a while, Samui said, and Naruto chuckled with a nod of apology. Samui casted her gaze to the large stone structure behind Naruto. And what is this? She asked, and Naruto turned around. A project, if you will, Naruto said, and Samui glanced at him. She only saw Naruto's reassuring smile and just left it at that. Besides, she would get it out of him sooner or later. I see, so now that you are back, what are you going to do? Samui asked, and Naruto grinned. It's what are we going to do, Samui-chan? I want to see everyone. Wanna walk with me? Naruto asked, and Samui shrugged her shoulders while they went inside. It didn't take Naruto very long to get changed before they walked out of the house. Naruto and Samui entered the Uchiha district and both noticed Makoto instructing Sasuke before they took notice of their guests. Hey Tem, it seems you've been working hard, Naruto said, and Sasuke turned around. He noticed Naruto and snorted while Makoto offered Sasuke a break and a small smile to Naruto before going inside. So how was life on the other side, idiot? Sasuke asked, and Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Oh, you know, same old shit. Just beat a few people. A few demons. Collected a few weapons. Nothing major, Naruto said, and Sasuke raised an eyebrow to those words. The blonde was boasting somewhere in his words, but Sasuke wasn't sure. Well, I'm so damn glad for you. We had a good time here too, if you didn't know it. Also, I met Itachi, Sasuke said, and Naruto's eyebrow twitched. He glared and slowly nodded while Samui looked between the two shinobi. Both were silent until Naruto broke that silence. I see. So what did he want? Naruto asked and Sasuke snorted. Hell if I know. I just know that he might have been looking for you. Good as hell that you were gone, Sasuke answered and Naruto narrowed his eyes. He'd definitely look into that later when he had the time. Well, you didn't get your kicked, I bet, which is why you're not a mess in the hospital, Naruto said and Sasuke grew a tick mark on his head. I'm no damn amateur idiot. I can handle myself. HMPH now if you don't mind, I have dance practice. Sasuke shuddered and Naruto widened his eyes. For what? Naruto asked and Sasuke's response was to almost jab him in the shoulder. Naruto easily dodged it with a smile while Sasuke growled. Your damn wedding. It's going to be the worst time of my life, Sasuke said going into the house while Naruto snickered. Samui just shook her head before they decided to leave the two alone. Deciding to go to something else, Naruto quickly ran across the streets with a mad grin across his face with Samui following him. The blonde said hey to many of his friends before he came up to his mother's door. Naruto knocked on it before he heard the door unlock. Hey Ka-chan, Naruto said crashing into Kurenai's body. The Genjutsu mistress widened her eyes to the initial contact before she took a good look at her son and wrapped her arms around his neck. You've been away, Naruto. I was getting worried about you. How is my son doing? Kurenai asked and Naruto nodded. I managed to add another 5 genjutsu tricks to my abilities. I even came back with a fair amount of ninjutsu. You're going to see how wicked strong I've gotten, Naruto said and Kurenai nodded with a smile. Samui just smiled as well while the three continued to talk for a little while. So this Tsunade lady is back along with her apprentice Shizune and they are also attending our wedding? Naruto asked and Kurenai nodded with a short smile. Apparently Tsunade-sama learned about you being Minato and Kushina's son and she had practically stormed into the mansion and threatened Sarutobi-sama to invite her, which he did. She had left a few days ago to grab some things. She said that she would be moving back into Konoha only for you. When Sarutobi asked if she would become the Hokage, then she responded that he'd have a better chance of her having with Jiraiya. Which was basically a no, Kurenai said and Naruto nodded. He really wouldn't mind meeting this woman. She sounded fairly decent to him anyway. I see. Well, Samui-chan told me some things, but what's been going on here? Naruto asked and Kurenai sighed. Well, recently Suna has been trying to find another cage, but with no luck. They are also searching for a missing nin by the name of Maki. Also, Kiri seems to be rearing for a civil war, Kurenai spoke and Naruto shuddered. He figured his network was overtime trying to handle everything. He had heard from Tayuya about her position in Yagura's forces. She was on the shinobi side while Kin was on the civilian side. They had told Naruto some things and it made him concerned for them. I see, Naruto said as his clothes shifted. No one seemed to notice before his thoughts were broken. He didn't plan on staying long, just a quick hello. He and Samui got up and left after spending some time with Kurenai. The two blondes quickly returned home since it was getting late and Naruto leaned against the couch. Samui leaned across his chest while Naruto gently patted her head. What are you thinking? Samui asked and Naruto glared up at the ceiling. That my network is going to be in trouble soon. I don't know what to think, Samui-chan, Naruto said and Samui glared up at him. She just sighed and stood up. I'll make us some dinner. In the mood for anything? She asked and Naruto turned to her. He hadn't eaten all day and he wanted to make a stop at Chuki and Ayame's place, but that wasn't happening today. He just grinned and shook his head. Anything you make is good with me, Samui-chan, Naruto said and Samui just nodded while Naruto took up a notepad. A pad that said, vows. He grinned and turned to Samui who was preparing to cook. Marriage, huh? Naruto thought to himself before he started to write on the pad. 1 month later. People could be seen walking towards a large building. Not really a cathedral like the one Naruto had seen, but quite a gathering nonetheless. They were all dressed in fancy clothing and kimonos. A few political figures had come as well. A lot of Konoha and Kumo shinobi and civilians were coming as well. Why? Well, it was the start of Mr. and Mrs. Yuhi Uzumaki. Even the members of the Hayabusa village and Mugen Tenshin clan were coming. Shiden wore some formal robes as did Joe. Kurha, Momiji, Kasumi and Ayane wore formal female kimonos each with their own specific designs. Ryu and Hayate wore the male version just like their fathers. Much to Sarutobi's chagrin, Danzo, Homura, and Kaharu were there as well, only to see the idiocy of the demon spawn marrying a female who would, undoubtedly, mother great Uchiha children. Well, that's what Kaharu and Homura thought. Danzo on the one hand was looking to see if he could just talk with Naruto during the recession. Glad you could make it, Joe-san, Shiden-san, Sarutobi said, and the two bowed before the three started to make idle conversation. Meanwhile, everyone else was seated down and Ayane took the time to look over the place. If you fidget any more, then your kimono is going to come undone, Kasumi said sincerely while Ayane grumbled. Yeah, she was here, but she didn't really like it either way. I know that. Still, I feel constricted in this is all, Ayane said, sighing, while Ryu and Hayate just continued to wait out the long people coming in. Among Samui's guests from her village were Karui, Omoi and Atsui. Yugito, Mabui, B.C., Darui and A were there as well, and Samui wouldn't have it any other way. Well, C was probably the most pissed off for Samui even marrying a Konoha dog, but he very well couldn't say that. For the occasion, Samui had taken Yugito's last name since neither she nor Atsui knew their parents. She had also asked Darui to give her away to Naruto, to which the white-haired dark-skinned Jonin nodded that he would. Everyone had been in formal attire, but Karui was the only one probably raging about it. I don't like it, damn it, she said, growling underneath her breath. Omoi rolled his eyes with his standard lollipop in his mouth. Whoever sis marries, then he'd better have a hot soul. He's got to, Atsui said, grinning, and the older adults just remained quiet. Well, mostly. Oh, this is nice. The famous binding of two souls is gonna be so tight. Yeah, B said before A ordered him to be quiet. Naruto's guests were the most probably. All the Jonin sensei were showing up along with their kids. For some reason Sakura was allowed to come, maybe because of her mother being on the council or that shit. Honestly, she didn't want to come. The only reason she did was so that she could dance with her Sasuke-kun. Shikamaru and Shikaku yawned in their own kimonos while Yoshino snapped them up and straight. Hinata, Hiyashi, Neji and Hanabi were together watching as well, with the first feeling just a little bit sad about this. Shino and Shibi had arrived as well, along with Shuza and Choji, Inoichi and Ino, Sume and Kiba and Hana. Sasuke and Makoto arrived together, making Sakura squeal slightly from his attire. Sasuke had on a suited kimono that went down to his legs. He just snorted at the squeal and sat next to Shikamaru. Tenten, her mother, Ayaku, and father, Tora, were in the crowd of people, with Lee being next to Guy. Kurenai, Asuma, Kakashi, Anko, Ibiki and a few others arrived as well. They sat down in the front rows of seats. Anko could honestly say that her little brother and her stepsister better stay married or she'd kill them both. Kakashi sucked at dancing and Anko wouldn't be going through that shit ever again, at least not with him. So how long until they arrive? Anko asked while Kurenai shrugged her shoulders. She couldn't believe that she had mothered the man getting married at that time. Hell, Kurenai could even see Tsunade and Shizune waiting impatiently. Also, if one looked up, then they could even see Jiraiya looking through a window with a smile on his face. Don't know, but I know that the dude's got to be a wreck. Marriage is scary, Asuma stated, getting a few laughs from everyone. So Sasuke, are you going to get married soon? I want grandchildren, Makoto said, and Sasuke's eyebrow twitched. He didn't even want to think about that at the moment. He still had his brother to deal with, but seeing Naruto and Samui, then he had thought about some things. Ka-san, Sasuke grumbled in a blush of embarrassment. Makoto and Yoshino chuckled and continued to talk together about kids. So troublesome, bothersome, Shikamaru and Shikaku said at nearly the same time. They slumped in their seats before Yoshino straightened them up again. So tell me, Ryu, how is your friend? Hayate asked with a smirk, and Ryu's eyebrow twitched. Yeah, it seems that in that last month Rachel and Alma had decided to visit Japan and coincidentally walk up Mt. Fuji in a hike and somehow find the Hayabusa village, and they claimed to know Ryu, so they were allowed to enter, after being searched. When Ryu had seen Rachel, awkward was the complete word for it. She's just an acquaintance, Hayate, Ryu said, folding his arms and ruffling his kimono slightly. Ryu snickered, and so did Kasumi and Momiji. Ryu hadn't ran away from her, but when he asked why she had come and how she found his village, she just hinted, saying, Kidetsu boycotted it to me. Ryu would so get Naruto back for it. It wouldn't be today, it wouldn't be tomorrow, but it would be sometime. Acquaintance. Reet. Ayane droned to herself, getting another snicker from Kasumi. Multiple people were talking to each other in the main room, but elsewhere. With Samui. The blonde female sighed as her, not overbearing, makeup was applied to her face. Not that she ever needed it. Samui never cared for her appearance except as a shinobi or her body's health. Well, that wasn't entirely true, as Samui had wanted to look nice for Naruto, something that she found out about herself ever since their first date those months ago. Samui-san, please hold still, a woman said, and Samui just kept herself closed, allowing for this mistreatment to continue. Samui also wore a long black kimono that hugged her body. It was made of a fine textile silk with blue flowers being able to be seen in it. Because of her short hair, the headpiece had to be designed, but Samui didn't want it. Something about not liking hats or that thing. Weddings aren't cool, Samui thought to herself. The kimono dropped to the floor. Its sleeves were just at the edge of her hand, with only her fingers being able to be shown. Her fingernails were colored white with a small flower design on them. Samui had her sandals placed on her feet by the artisans while she sighed. I wonder if Naruto is going through the same thing. More than likely he's complaining, Samui thought to herself while her light blue eyes closed while she was continuing to be worked over. We are ready for you, Samui-ni, someone said, and Samui opened her eyes and sighed while she stood to her feet. She walked out of the door and she only heard a gasp that had her open her eyes to seeing Darui looking at her. The right hand to the rackage just smiled and held out his arm, which Samui took. That Uzumaki is a lucky guy, he said, and Samui just stared at Darui for a bit before they walked out. With Naruto. Samui was never more right as Naruto fidgeted while men continued to shape and tuck his kimono. The blonde nearly growled and wondered if anyone would mind if he killed them all, but withheld it, for now anyway. Naruto had on black kimono as well. Only difference from Samui's was that it had small foxes running around it, which strangely no one was able to point it to Kyuubi, but Naruto was more than glad for her. He just sighed inwardly with his arms outstretched before heard someone speak. Oh Kyuubi-kun, how long has it been since this happened? Nibi asked in the Mindscape house, grinning at the TV in front of her, seeing what Naruto was looking at, which was a mirror showing what the blonde was wearing. Kyuubi was grinning looking at the TV, not a grin like Nibi's. No, it was one of pure happiness. No, not happy for the kid being married, happy that Naruto would soon go through the hell that married life had to offer. It was a bitch when it had to be. Oh, Kyuubi remembered that time. Sometimes he wished he could forget it. 1200 years, 3 months, 4 weeks, 2 days, 1 hour, 34 minutes, 45 seconds and 12 nanoseconds, and counting, Kyuubi responded jokingly while Nibi pouted at her husband. She then proceeded to sit in Kyuubi's lap while smiling. Don't you remember the kimono that I wore? Nibi asked, and Kyuubi sighed. Yeah, he remembered it all. He remembered himself tearing it off her body the second that they got home and screwing his wife into submission for at least 3 days endlessly. What? He was a demon. Don't judge him. I think I tore that, didn't I? Kyuubi asked, getting a boner at the thought, one that Nibi noticed. She purred before rubbing her soft hands on Kyuubi's face. I'm glad you remembered. You'll be doing it tonight, understood? Nibi asked, and Kyuubi grinned with an obedient nod of his head. Why wait? We should do it now. Not while you're in my mind, you don't. You are not screwing each other in my head. At least until I mentally block you out. So you'd better keep yourself in check, Fox. Naruto said in his thoughts, and Kyuubi snorted while he leaned his elbow on the arm of the chair. Spoil sport. Can't a demon just screw his mate senselessly without getting the nagging of his jailer? Sheesh, Kyuubi thought to himself while Naruto sighed. He then got a pat on his back and turned to see the men giving him a thumbs up that he was all good. Naruto sighed and rolled his eyes. His heart was pounding right now. He couldn't believe this was happening right now. He'd gladly face Mirai again just to not be here, but he was here and damn it, he would stay. Besides, he honestly couldn't wait to see Samui arrive in her dress. He longed to see it. Ahem. Yuhi Uzumaki-san, we're ready for you. Please come, an attendant said, and Naruto sighed outwardly and nodded. A shout of encouragement came from Nibi while Kyuubi just wished the brat luck, and Naruto stood to his feet and walked out of the door. He looked up and out of a window. 2-san. Ka-san. Wish me luck, Naruto said with a smile, and he shivered as he felt 2 pushes to his body. Naruto turned around and was sure that he saw a man with blonde hair like his hugging a woman with red hair. Did he imagine it? Main room. Song. We Both Deserve Each Other's Love by Jeffrey Osborne. Ahem. I am glad that you could all come to this ceremony. As you all know, I'm the Sandaime Hokage of Konoha, Hiruzen Sarutobi, and will be bringing these 2 souls together. I will also be dictating this wedding ceremony. We will first see Konoha's Ice Fox, son of the Genjutsu mistress Kurenai Yuhi, Naruto Yuhi Uzumaki. Sarutobi called out and people heard the doors behind them open as Naruto came through the door with his kimono quickly tightened. Cheers erupted from people, but Naruto could see a few sneers in the crowd. People never change at all. He then turned to his mother, who smiled along with his surrogate sister, who gave him a thumbs up. Even his uncle, Ibiki, was smiling at the scene. HMPH Samui could do better, she said silently, even though a few people caught him. No one said anything, but Yugito jabbed him in the ribs, getting a wince out of him. She just smiled and clapped for the younger blonde in front of her. Kurenai just smiled in her seat along with other people. Sasuke and Shikamaru snorted, but the former could at least smile for his best friend, not that he would tell people that. Ayane just folded her legs underneath her kimono and she and Naruto spared a passing glance. She noticed Naruto's smile and a part of her twitched from those blue eyes of his. She just didn't know how to handle such a thing. Naruto arrived to the front greeting his old man and Hokage. Sarutobi then cleared his throat and spoke. As well as Kumo's young lightning, sister of Yugito ni and Atsui ni. We have Samui ni from Kumo, Sarutobi said, and the doors opened. Naruto couldn't resist it anymore and he turned his head almost faster than the others. He widened his eyes and gulped while some people gasped outright. Samui came into the room with one of her arms over Darui's as he guided her down the walkway. Samui had noticed Naruto's eyes. They couldn't leave her face. She was just so lovely and beautiful. That white creamy skin and the light shade of lipstick to her lips that he had kissed before. Samui kept her eyes forward for a bit, but she couldn't glance towards someone, and that person happened to be Ayane. The 2 kunoichi glanced at each other and it seems that they were having an inward conversation, one that was just between them. Samui gave an unnoticeable nod and so did Ayane. Samui stood before Naruto with a lot of Kumo shinobi cheering for her while the Raikage just smiled while folding his large muscles across his chest. So that's Minato and Kushina's kid, huh? Tsunade said to herself. Shizune did the same before she whimpered, making Tsunade turn to her. Shizune, you are not about to. Tsunade trailed off while Shizune shivered. It's not my fault, Tsunade-sama. You know how I get during weddings, Shizune countered while Tsunade sighed. She just nodded with a roll of her eyes and her long legs crossed. She hadn't been planning to stay in Konoha long, but it called her, and while Tsunade would have ignored it in favor of gambling and drinking, this call was so strong that it demanded she come. She never was sure why, but she was here and that's what counted. Darui watched the 2 blondes look at each other and sigh before he backed away, allowing the proceeds to continue. Sarutobi nodded his head and looked at the 2 blondes before clearing his throat. We will now exchange vows. The groom shall go first, he said, and Naruto stiffened. He turned to face Samui and they both noticed that Kurenai, Ibiki, and Anko, carrying Makata, stood to their feet while Yugito, Atsui and Darui faced them. They all faced each other while Naruto spoke. Samui, I shouldn't be here. No, not here, not with you and not have the life I have. I was hated for something beyond my control. It was only because of my mother, Kurenai Yuhi, that I am here. She has trained me in the Genjutsu arts as well as the shinobi arts and taijutsu. Working hard with her, my sister and my uncle, I excelled at the academy. It's how I became the rookie of the year, it's also how I met the most beautiful woman in my life. Her blonde hair, her light blue eyes, her beautiful face and her amazing tenacity. I know what it's like to have had nothing, so I want you to trust me that I will never take you for granted. I love you, Samui ni. I hope you're with me until the end of our lives, Naruto said, and Samui shuddered. No words like that had ever been said to her. Samui looked down at the ground and contemplated something before Sarutobi cleared his throat. And now the bride, he said, and Samui nodded to herself. Naruto deserved one, A real one. A true one. The best one she could muster. Samui gazed at Naruto and smiled. She blue eyes lost most of their coldness and she really tried her best smile to her soon-to-be husband. Samui cleared her throat and spoke. Naruto, I'm not good at warm things like you just said. I haven't had such things said to me before and I find them lovely. I grew up without knowing my parents like you, and I still don't know them, but I feel that because I worked hard that I have another family. My brother Atsui, my sister Yugito and my surrogate father Darui. I loved them all and it's because of them that I met you as well as this treaty. I don't care about the Konoha treaty. Raikage-sama gave me the option to refuse, but I didn't, even now I wouldn't refuse it. It's because I have met a very serious man willing to take on any and all challenges around him as well as continue to be cool in what he does. I've learned a lot from you. I can honestly say it all with pride right now, without doubt, without hesitation. I love you Naruto Uzumaki. I wish to stay with you for the rest of our lives. Samui spoke finishing her vows and people smiled at the warmness in the air. Jiraiya chuckled on top of the roof as he had heard everything while he basked in the warm sun. This was a good day. Naruto Yuhi Uzumaki, do you take Samui ni as your legally bound and lawfully wedded wife? Sarutobi asked and Naruto grinned outright while he took Samui's creamy hands and kissed them gently. Of course I do. There was never a doubt Dadbeo, Naruto said and Sarutobi nodded. Samui ni, do you take Naruto Yuhi Uzumaki as your legally bound and lawfully wedded husband? Sarutobi asked and Samui closed her eyes. She brought up a hand up and gently caressed Naruto's left cheek. It's cool that I say I do, Samui spoke and Sarutobi nodded his head. Hey Sasuke, are you okay man? Shikamaru asked the brunette Uchiha who was shivering slightly. Makoto glanced at her son and only she could see the small water drop on Sasuke's kimono. Shut up lazy. I'm fine damn it, Sasuke said and Shikamaru just muttered. Troublesome, before he turned to see Shikaku lightly snoring. He sighed at his old man as he knew it would get it later. Ino clutched her kimono at her Naruto-kun, being stolen by another blonde, but she would have to put up with it. Hanabi and Neji didn't say anything and neither did Hiyashi. Hinata was probably the most silent and unmoving of them all though. Most youthful, Lee spoke next to Guy and the two brought each other into a manly hug, or not, depending on people's shuddering. Minato-sensei, are you proud? Kakashi asked at nothing in particular. Man Naruto's so damn lucky. I'm so gonna get a babe like that. Hiba vowed making Sum and Hana laugh at him, but both could see why he would say that. How are you holding up? Kasumi asked Ayane who was just looking without a simple care in the world. She had her talk with Samui already so there was no need to try to snap anything with her hands, yet. I'm fine. Just leave me alone, Ayane said sort of bitterly, but everyone could guess why. People stood next to Sarutobi while they poured sake into some small dishes, Tsunade's favorite part of weddings and receptions. Naruto and Samui took their cups and held them in their hands, but before they could drink both turned to see the members of their families bow to each other. I am Kurenai Yuhi, Naruto Yuhi Uzumaki's adoptive mother, Kurenai spoke and people nodded while the next continued. I'm his surrogate sister, Enko Mitarashi at your service. Enko saluted. And I'm his surrogate uncle, Ibiki Morino. Ibiki spoke to the Kumo shinobi as the three drank their sake cups. The three Kumo shinobi who had been standing nodded lifted up their own sake cups and spoke. I am Yugito ni, Samui ni's surrogate sister, Yugito responded. I am her biological brother, Atsui ni. Yo, Atsui said with a very cheeky grin across his young face and Darui bowed with a sigh. I am her surrogate father, Darui. Ni. Nice to meet you, Darui said and the three drank their own sake cups before everyone faced back towards Naruto and Samui. The two nodded to each other and, adding their own unique flair. Naruto and Samui intertwined their arms and quickly drank together in unison. Naruto grinned and Samui offered a calm smile. By the power vested in me as the Sandaime Hokage of Konoha as well as by the Yondaime Raikage of Kumo and the Kumo-Konoha alliance. I now pronounce you Mr. and Mrs. Yuhi Uzumaki. The groom may do what he's done already. This earned a few giggles from the crowd before Sarutobi continued. And kiss the bride, Sarutobi finished and Naruto nodded. He turned back to Samui and the two quickly brought each other into a hot kiss. Naruto wrapped his arms around Samui's waist and Samui wrapped her arms around Naruto's neck. Much to Naruto's surprise, a lot of people cheered for them, people who had sneered at him, but they were all joy for him now. It made his heart lighten. Kit's got the ball and chain now. Kyuubi shouted before Nibi smacked him over the head. She shook her head at her husband before Kyuubi grabbed his wife and the two quickly went out of the house and he twirled her in the fields much to Nibi's amusement and laughter. Naruto and Samui quickly exited the hall and, going back home shinobi style, the groom picked up the bride and shouted, "I'm married Datbeo." Naruto shouted and he quickly dashed off for his house across the rooftops and towards the Namikaze compound while people began to walk out of the shrine. Ayane heard the noise and snorted as she watched him leave. She walked out only for her arms to be grabbed by Shiden. "We need to talk." Namikaze house. Naruto landed on the ground of the floor and quickly opened the door. He and Samui landed on the couch of the house giggling for a little bit. Samui laid on top of Naruto and smiled while Naruto chuckled. "Man, that was insane. I can't believe we did that," Naruto said and Samui closed her eyes. "It's a part of the treaty. We had to, but it's cool that we did it anyway," Samui said and Naruto could honestly agree with that. The two let the silence go for a little while before they stared. Naruto smiled and Samui gently smiled back. They brought each other into another kiss just like back at the shrine, just enjoying the full feeling of each other. Samui pulled back and leaned up while Naruto did the same. They both huffed and Samui leaned against Naruto's shoulder while the blonde placed his head next to hers. "My wife, Samui Yuhi Uzumaki," Naruto said and Samui closed her eyes. "I'll keeping saying it, but I'm not wearing this thing to the reception." "It took a lot to not fall in this thing," Samui said and Naruto chuckled. "Also, I don't see why they put makeup on you. You're just a lot more beautiful without it," Naruto said and Samui twitched. She just stared blankly at Naruto and smiled. "You will make a great husband," Samui said to him and Naruto smiled. He wanted to respond, but they had to get out of their wedding kimonos and into some simple dress ones for the reception. It was their day after all. With Tayuya. Tayuya grumbled to herself as she and her squad landed on a couple of misty treetops. Just her luck, she had to be paired with Chojuro, Suiran and some stupid no-name jackass. Why? She had sent a letter to Naruto about the Kiri rebellion and he had responded that she learn as much as she could while still being inconspicuous to them. Tayuya didn't need to be told twice before she landed on the ground. "I don't see anyone," Tayuya said cautiously. Chojuro nodded in agreement with his partner while Suiran looked left and right. "This is weird. Sources indicate that they should be around." Suiran widened her eyes as she backflipped away from a jutsu, an ice jutsu to be exact. Tayuya growled and took out her flute while Chojuro grabbed his sword. "Well, look who we have here." Suiran, still following that bastard Yagura. Someone asked. It was obviously male with the gruff voice, that's what Tayuya knew. She saw the large sword on his back and the slashed Kiri headband. He wore the standard Kiri long pants and open-toed sandals. Right next to him was a hunter nin. He or she, it had long black hair, pale skin and a slender frame, and was also quite short for he or her age. The normal attire consisted of the standard Kurigakure pinstriped outfit which stopped at its knees. Over this it wore a green haori with white trimmings, and around its waist a brown sash with a fringe trail wrapped around its waist twice. "Zabuza, how nice to see you. I heard about you. You worked for Gato and almost got killed by Kakashi Hataki's group which had an Uchiha in it, I'm sure." This was in Wave. "So what are you doing now and what's the tattoo seal in his arm?" Suiran asked before Zabuza turned to Haku who covered, a summoning seal. "Her name is Haku. Thank you very much, and this seal is none of your business. Maybe I have the same thing and we think it's cool. Also, if you want to know, you could just fight us for it," Zabuza said with a weird grin. Suiran glared and took out her sword while Chojuro and Tayuya glared down the hunter nin. "Well, I won't have any sympathies doing that. I always considered you my friend, but duties come before anything," Suiran said and Zabuza snorted. He glanced at Tayuya which told her to get ready and Tayuya nodded her head before she turned back to Haku who held up her hand to her mask. It wasn't to remove it, but to show Tayuya the seal and the redhead nodded her head. "Listen up, shithead. This bitch is fast, so when I tell you to move, you move, got it?" Tayuya asked, turning to Chojuro, who nodded. Hi Tayuya-san, Chojuro said while Tayuya turned back to Haku. It was time to start a little fight of her own. In Suna. That is why you guys are the best to go after Maki and locate her. You will need to. It is of the utmost importance that you do, the Suna council said to Gaara and his siblings. Konkuro glared and shrugged his shoulder, deciding to try and protect his fellow organization member. She's just one low-ranked genin. Why are you bringing so much heat over her? Can't you just send a chunin to get here? Konkuro asked, and while Temari wanted to protect Maki, she had wondered the same thing. What was it about Maki that got the council so frantic? Gaara narrowed his eyes in suspicion of the council members in front of him before one of them slammed the ground, causing Konkuro to flinch, Temari to snort, and Gaara to remain unmoving. It's not your choice to question us, chunin. You will get the job done, and we mean get it done and return her to Suna. A councilman shouted, and Konkuro was about to blow up in his face before Gaara just bowed and told his siblings to follow him out. Temari quickly pulled Konkuro out of the room, and once the door was closed, she turned to Gaara. Gaara, what are we going to do? Temari asked, and Gaara folded his arms. He looked at the seal on his hands and closed his eyes. We will do our job. We will find her and warn her. Let's go, Gaara said as he walked off. Temari and Konkuro glanced at each other before they nodded and followed him out to their house. Still, a question plagued Gaara's mind. What could they want with her? She wouldn't know any village secrets to give an enemy, and they are making such a fuss about her that the village is tighter than usual. They are also quick to think that she ran away rather than being kidnapped, which she isn't. What are they hiding? Gaara thought to himself as they disappeared. With Pakura, Fu and Maki. Pakura widened her eyes, and so did Fu, in shock and awe, while Maki shivered. At their feet were 3 dead Odo shinobi, 1 jonin and 2 chunin. All had surrounded an orange-haired girl with a blue cap on her head. She wore a genin's Odo attire and shivered at what she saw, which was Maki huffing and her hand sticking out. The orange-haired girl then fell back into unconsciousness. Maki, Pakura said, shocked, while Maki turned around. She almost cried in front of her best friend and her sensei as black sand dissolved into the ground beneath them. Maki fell to the ground before Fu ran up to her and patted Maki on the shoulder. Pakura-sensei. I didn't mean to. They were going to attack her and I just thought that. Maki trailed off by Pakura patting her on the head. Hey, we'll figure this out. For right now, let's just get her somewhere safe. Don't worry, Maki. It will be alright, Pakura said, and Maki just nodded her head before Pakura picked up the girl and the 3 walked off. They never noticed, or at least Fu and Maki never noticed, a man with 6 arms slowly descending on a spider web with a grin as he placed an finger to his mic. Inform Orochimaru-sama. He's going to have a shit-eating orgasm when he learns of this, he said, and there was a voice over the radio before he disappeared into the air. Having arrived at a temporary dwelling space in Odo for the moment, Pakura and her 2 younger network friends had decided to rest up as well as go over what they had just seen. Pakura, however, had felt the presence that had seen them, but didn't react to it as they had been in the public's eye view, and she didn't want to cause any unnecessary attention to them. It wouldn't have helped the network if she did. Pakura placed the unconscious girl on the couch of the apartment while Maki and Fu placed down their bags and supplies. It would be a long time, but for right now they had infiltrated Odo and would keep it under wraps. Alright, when she comes to, we will ask for her explanation and what happened to her. While we wait for her, I'm going to be teaching the both of you. Maki, you know more shinobi techniques than Fu-san does, so I will be taking Fu to learn of her elemental affinity. In that time I want you to keep a watch over this girl here. Also practice any of your techniques in relative silence while this is done. Later we will walk around as well as see if we can't find any information, Pakura explained. Maki nodded her head, although Pakura could see that it was a slow one. Fu nodded as well with the instructions. Pakura turned to leave the room, but she casted one last glare to Maki, who had sat down near the kitchen table. Maki stared at her hands in both shock and confusion as well as in fear. Pakura sighed and shook her head before she continued to walk to her room and get changed. The image of what Maki had done was still burned into her mind. For as long as Pakura knew her, Maki was never able to do that. Her eyes changed. Also, she unconsciously called upon Black Sand. I always wondered why the council had asked me to train her. Granted, I would have trained her even had they not asked, but they always seemed reluctant to fully let her leave the village, even with me around. What's going on here? The only person to ever have that ability was the third cage. What didn't they tell me? Pakura thought to herself. She just sighed again and shook her head while she slowly took off her clothes and decided to let the matter rest for the time being. It wouldn't do her good to have Maki seeing her anxious. Her student was anxious enough already. I also have to inform Naruto about this. He told us to tell him all the dealings and things that happen to not just the nations, but also ourselves. I just hope that he can come up with something that I can't, Pakura said to herself before she quickly changed and left the room. All right, Fu. Let's go and find a private place, Pakura said, and Fu nodded. She gave Maki a goodbye wave as the two opened and closed the door and left. Maki grumbled at the relative silence before she just sat on the rough floor and continued to work on her chakra control. Her elemental affinity had been fire, but Maki didn't know any fire jutsu. Well, she knew one, but that was it. She just had her taijutsu and a bit of genjutsu. Maki sighed and opened a scroll which showed her the various Kaden techniques, though they were only D to C from a small shinobi shop. I guess I will work. It will keep my mind off it, Maki thought, and with a nod she slowly began to work. With Tayuya. Tayuya growled as she backflipped away into the misty treetops. She saw Chojuro dodge to the side and roll out of the way from Haku Senbon. Bitch is good. Sheesh. When I recruited these assholes I didn't think about the shitty mess they would bring. But whatever. Guess I'll help the, Tayuya said as her kunai and Haku Senbon clashed against each other. They glared at each other, or at least Tayuya glared. Haku had her mask on, so Tayuya wasn't really sure. You can't match my speed, Haku said, and Tayuya snorted. She had to admit that when she had first seen Haku, that she liked the person, but that arrogant pride in speed had really pissed her off. She wasn't as fast as Orochimaru when the guy was serious. Speed ain't anything without the strength to back it up, bitch, Tayuya said, and Haku's response was to just glare behind her mask. Her eyes darted to the left and saw Zabuza still dealing with Suiren. The sound of swords clashing rang in the mist. Tayuya took the opportune moment and punched Haku across the face, sending her skidding back. Chojuro saw an opportunity and took it quickly. He raised his sword into the air and yelled, bringing it down. Haku glared at the attack coming for her before she quickly got up and ran over to the side. She glared at both Tayuya and Chojuro before giving a slight huff. She noticed Tayuya give a slight signal and gave a nod. Well, you are more than I thought. Unfortunately, I think it's time I made my departure to Zabuza-sama's side, Haku said, and she quickly dashed for the fight between Zabuza and Suiren. Tayuya growled outwardly, but inwardly smirked. Well, what are you waiting for? Let's catch her, Tayuya shouted, and Chojuro gave a hesitant nod before they dashed off as well. With Zabuza and Suiren. Suiryuden no Jutsu, Zabuza and Suiren shouted at the same time. Two water dragons quickly appeared over them both and slammed into each other, causing a loud splash to come over the field. The water fell over Zabuza and Suiren, but the two ignored it. You really have grown. I just wish that we could still be friends, Suiren said, sorrowful, but she was surprised when Zabuza just chuckled while he went through some hand signs. Suiren started to do the same while Zabuza smirked. We would be if you weren't on the bullshit side of this war. Don't go acting like you want to try, Zabuza told her, and Suiren just glared at him before they both shouted again. Sweden. Daibakufu no Jutsu. The water rose to their command and quickly swirled before it slammed together. Suiren saw her own chance and quickly dove into the water. She then tightened her grip on her sword and lunged it at Zabuza from inside the water. Zabuza widened his eyes before he pivoted his foot in order to gain momentum and swing his sword at Suiren. The two swords collided and sparks flew from them before Suiren swung her body to avoid the massive sword cleaver. She quickly landed on the ground and huffed. Then there is nothing more to talk about, Suiren spoke softly before she tried to dash at Zabuza again. She didn't get far, however, before two ice Senbon stuck to the ground. Suiren glared at Haku, who stood next to Zabuza. It made her worry about Tayuya and Chojuro before the two appeared next to her, causing her worry to fade. Zabuza-sama, the two are more than we though, Haku said, keeping up the act that Tayuya wanted her to do. Zabuza glared and grabbed the hilt of his sword again. Suiren saw the act and quickly gathered chakra to her legs for an immediate dash. Is that right? Well, Suiren, looks like you get off the hook for today. Come on, Haku, we're done here, Zabuza said, and Haku nodded her head before the mist overtook them and their entire presence disappeared. Seeing them leave, Suiren sighed and shook her head. She sheathed her sword and turned to Tayuya and Chojuro, the latter more than a little banged up. Well, we survived for the most part. Nice work, Tayuya, Chojuro. Now that we know Zabuza is here, then we can complete our mission, albeit with a lot more difficulty, Suiren said, and Chojuro nodded as he gave a very heavy sigh and let his body fall to the ground. Still, Suiren-sensei, why is it so wrong? The people with bloodlines. You had friends who had them right. I'm not questioning Yagura-sama, but it doesn't seem right. They could be helping Kiri, not destroying it, Chojuro said, and Suiren raised an eyebrow. She did nod, and the very thoughts of seeing her friends die by her hand wasn't something that she had wanted. Having her friends hunted down like animals just because they could mask one or two elemental natures together to get a new one, or because their bodies changed. Hell, Tayuya changed, but she had put that it wasn't a Kekai Genkai, but a product of her being captured and tested by Orochimaru. I don't know what to tell you, Chojuro. I will, however, say that you will need to come to this conclusion on your own. It's not something that I can fully help you with, as I struggle with it also. It's not right, I know, but there is nothing that can be done at the moment. As long as I adorn this headband, then I'm a Kiri shinobi, and it pains me, but I will do my job, Suiren said, and Chojuro nodded. I understand, Suiren-san, Chojuro said before he turned to Tayuya. She just shrugged her shoulders before she walked to their destination. Suiren and Chojuro followed her, and while Suiren didn't know it, Tayuya had felt the same way. Granted, besides Kin, she didn't really know anyone in Kiri, well, except that store owner, Suiren, and Chojuro himself. However, she was sure that somewhere Suiren was right and yet not right at the same time. At least I got them to back the off and leave. Now then, let's just hope that whoever this rebel leader is will think twice before doing more of this shit, Tayuya thought to herself as they walked off. Hidden base in Oto. Orochimaru snickered to himself as his lackey told him the information. Oh, how joyous this was. He had the Shikuden Kekai Genkai in his village as well as the hero of Suna all in one package. However, the other bit of information just got him to a near orgasm. Yeah, weird, isn't it? Yuck. Kidomaru, you can leave now, Orochimaru said, and the six-armed shinobi nodded with a bow and quickly left. Orochimaru chuckled to himself and looked out of the window from where he was working. The Shikuden, the hero of Suna, as well as a possible descendant of the third Kazekage. It is a shame that I couldn't get Sasuke-kun, but that will all change. His mother and Itachi are too much work to try and acquire, but I can wait. Now then, let's see what I can do about those two, Orochimaru said with a hidden snicker going across his face. Right next to him was Kabuto, who was busy looking at a computer screen while holding a test tube. He examined it closely before he handed it to Orochimaru. The snake Sanin smirked and took the vial in his hands. Kabuto, prepare Kimimaro for a little test. It will do him well to know where he stands currently, Orochimaru said, and Kabuto nodded with a bow of his head, though it was reluctant. Orochimaru-sama, what about his illness? He won't last long at this rate. We could send someone else. What about Gurren or even myself? We could even wait a few days and have someone from one of the hideouts come, Kabuto said, and Orochimaru's response was to punch the wall in front of him. Kabuto, don't make me repeat myself. I said use Kimimaro. Who knows how long we have before they both try to up and leave. I will not let such gems get away. Also, Kidomaru said that there might be a Jinchuriki among them. That will push research along even more. Send Kimimaro. Understood. Orochimaru asked, and Kabuto nodded, bowing a little lower to know that his master was serious. He then turned on a heel and left quickly. Konohagakure. Nighttime, unknown building. Naruto and Samui sighed to each other as they sat together at a table. Right around them were their close family and friends that had been invited to join the reception. They had the entire afternoon to themselves, and they just used that time to get too accustomed to married life. They then had to change into their wedding kimonos and have their little reception. And to you, Mr. and Mrs. Yuhi Uzumaki, I wish you a lifetime of happiness, Chuki said, raising his saucer into the air. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly while the other people chuckled. Everyone had offered the two blondes their own words of acknowledgement to their happiness, and the two accepted them all. Seeing that no one was left, Sarutobi stood to his feet and cleared his throat to speak into the mic. And now we will have the married couple offer a dance with each other. It will be the first dance of the night and we'll start with them. Naruto Yuhi Uzumaki, Samui Yuhi Uzumaki, please come down, Sarutobi said, and the two stood up. A little soft music played as they appeared. Naruto offered his hand and Samui took it. Samui rested her other hand on Naruto's shoulder while the blonde rested his at her waist. The two quickly swayed over the dance floor, not really caring who was watching. Both seemed to into each other to realize that they were just doing what felt natural. Naruto spun Samui around a few times while Samui moved to Naruto's pace. Over that entire month, it had taken the two quite a while to learn proper dance moves, but they had persisted and this was the result. They moved fluidly from and into each other's embrace. However, before they knew it, they turned their heads to seeing a funny sight. They saw Sakura and Ino fighting over who got to dance with Sasuke, which made the Uchiha groan. Seeing that they were being themselves, Sasuke walked over to Momiji and asked for a dance that she readily accepted. Let's dance, Matabi-chan. It's been well over a month since then. I'll even have a clone set the mood, Kyuubi said, and Nibi smiled as she uncrossed her legs and stood to her feet. At least I was able to beat that horrible violent attitude out of you. You are still in a time, darling, but that's why I love you. Yes, let's, Nibi said as Kyuubi took her out of the house and the two married Biju danced away. Ryu had decided to dance with Konoha since they were children. Hayate and Kasumi danced together merely out of the thought of having fun with each other and to enjoy their time in Konoha before they had to get back to their own works. None of the political figures danced merely because they didn't want to, but they took great pleasure in the sight. They also saw Anko grumbling while Kakashi tried his best to dance with her. They could tell that Kakashi really wasn't one for dancing per se, but they could at least see that he was trying, and that was what really counted. After about half an hour of dancing, Naruto turned and he noticed Ayane still sitting down. The blonde glared and smiled. He turned back to Samui and darted his eyes to the left, telling her the message. Samui glanced to the left immediately and she took notice of what Naruto was looking at. She inwardly smiled, but kept her cool facade and nodded. Just don't wear yourself out, she said, and Naruto nodded. The two parted from each other and Naruto proceeded to walk over to Ayane. Ayane hadn't seen him move at all, or rather her mind wasn't focused on him until she saw his blue eyes. She slightly jumped from his immediately presence before she noticed Naruto's hand out and the calm, gesturing smile adorning his face. I don't dance, she said rather coldly, and Naruto rolled his eyes and he grabbed her arm, then pulled her up and dragged her to the floor. Now you do, he responded, and Ayane just sighed as they came. Naruto placed Ayane's hand on his shoulder and his hand rested on her waist just like Samui's. He quickly moved Ayane across the floor and helped to guide her movements. It was just like Genjutsu, all you had to do was be in control of one person and make them follow your lead. Ayane turned her head to Samui's and saw her just watching the two dance. It sort of unnerved Ayane by how calm she was being. However, she didn't deny that this was a nice experience. Not really having anyone desire her from her village was sort of the cause for her personality, but now she was seen as a true woman to the blonde in front of her. You move pretty well, Ayane complimented as she twirled under Naruto's arms. The blonde smirked at the compliment. It seems that even without dancing, Ayane was very light on her feet and instinctively knew where Naruto would lead her, so she could follow perfectly. Her red eyes in contrast to his blue eyes seemed to be a mixture of different personalities, but flowing together all the same. Naruto and Ayane danced a little longer before they parted, and Naruto finally allowed Ayane to leave. He really wanted to at least kiss her like he did Samui, but no one knew of Ayane's true relationship to him other than himself, Samui, Ayane, and her friends. Still, there was that talk that Ayane was supposed to have with Shiden. She had asked to postpone it until later, and that was agreeable to Shiden. Naruto decided to take a small break and he sat down in a chair while Samui danced with Darui. Something of a last request from his surrogate daughter. Naruto just smiled as the two danced and then finally sighed while he leaned his head back. Don't tell me the great stamina brat is already tuckered out from just two dances. Have I been going that easy on you in our training? Naruto leaned his head back to the noise and a large grin came across his face as he saw Kyoko folding her arms at him, hovering over his face. Well, there are two things with that. See, you never hold back, which makes you a slave driver, Kyoko-chan. Second, stamina in dancing and in training are two totally different things. And, Naruto paused as his eyes trailed down Kyoko's kimono. She wore a light blue one, but seemed to complement her hair as well as wrap around her mature figure. Around her kimono was various dark blue roses which looked really nice. And what? Keep those eyes to yourself. Besides, you've got a wife. Won't she be jealous? But I can understand. Yeah, Kyoko-sama is very desirable in the eyes of all men. It's a blessing and a curse, she said before Naruto just grabbed her hand and walked her to the floor. Kyoko's eyebrow twitched before she stood with Naruto together. What's this? She asked and Naruto just shrugged his shoulders. He just grabbed Kyoko's hand again and placed his arm at her waist while he responded. Honestly, I don't know. I just have a very compelling need to dance with you right now, Kyoko-chan. Is that a no? Naruto asked and Kyoko rolled her arms. Like Anko, she wasn't much for dancing as she had always had her life in danger and the such as a missing nin, but this was nice, she figured. Just shut up. You'd better be lucky that it's you or I would castrate anyone else. Now let's just do this shit already, she said and Naruto nodded as they moved to the spot music. Naruto could tell that Kyoko, despite bashing it, was quite fast on her legs as she kept up with Naruto quite easily. Naruto twirled her around and they quickly moved again. Teacher and student, big sis and little brother, just doing a casual dance. I want to thank you, Kyoko-chan. Thanks for the lessons, for the training, and thank you for trusting me when you came back with me. Honestly, I really do think of you as family. That's why when you weren't at the wedding I was a little sad, Naruto said and Kyoko just listened to his words. She just sucked her teeth and rolled her eyes. Don't get all sentimental on me. I just didn't go because I don't understand shit like this. Weddings, I mean, Kyoko said and Naruto raised an eyebrow as their movements slowed down. Why not? Did you get left at an altar or something? Naruto asked before he got a tight pinch that made him wince. No, I didn't, brat. I'd have to be like to get married. That's not it. Look, this is your day. Let's not make it about me today, Kyoko told him and Naruto just nodded, but his curiosity was raging. He really wanted to know, but he would respect her wishes. Alright then, Naruto responded and Kyoko was secretly very happy for his cooperation. The two soon stopped dancing and Kyoko began to walk away. Naruto just watched her leave before she turned back to him. Oh, and if you tell anyone that we danced then, brother or not, I will kill you. Got it? Kyoko asked and Naruto nodded his head with a small gulp while Kyoko gave a cheeky smile and walked away. Apart from Naruto, Tsunade was sitting in a chair drinking sake like there was no tomorrow. This was why she loved weddings, to get drunk without any Shizune trying to bother her. It was the life. Hey Haim, wanna dance? Jiraiya suddenly asked and Tsunade's eyebrow twitched. It was almost the life. She dropped her sake cup and placed it on the table in front of her before turning back to her old teammate. With a pervert like you? No way, Tsunade said with a grumble and Jiraiya just chuckled as he sat down next to her. Tsunade just continued to drink before Jiraiya took a cup. Don't be like that. We haven't seen each other in how long? Who knows if you will be staying this time, Jiraiya said and Tsunade snorted. I won't be. Once this thing is done then I'm leaving. I only came back for some supplies. That's it, Tsunade said and Jiraiya chuckled with a nod. You wouldn't even stay for your cousin. How dull, Tsunade. I didn't know you were so cold, Jiraiya said and Tsunade flinched. She knew he was talking about Naruto, Kushina's son. Yeah, there was still the issue. She had left because she didn't have any family left or so she thought. The brat's all grown up now. There isn't a need for me to be around, she said with a huff while Jiraiya snorted. Yeah, Kami knows that you weren't around during his younger years. Sure, I'm no better, but at least I try to stay on his good side. Don't know about you, Jiraiya said and Tsunade growled. He was really going to play that guilt card with her. Oh Kami, let's go. Dance. If you're not going to give me a moment's peace then I'll just exhaust you and then continue with my sake. Well, come on. or I'm rescinding my offer, Tsunade said with a hand on her hip. She just blinked as Jiraiya swiftly pulled her to the dance floor while shutting him up all the same. Damn it, Jiraiya, now I feel bad. Guess I'll go talk to the kid tomorrow or something, Tsunade thought to herself before she danced with her teammate while the entire reception continued to go. Meanwhile, Naruto and Samui were speaking with some guests as they decided to take a break. Both were eating their cake before Naruto felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned his head and lightly glared at Danzo. Samui turned to see the councilman also, and she offered a cold glare. Ever since she had first seen him, she didn't like him. Naruto had told her about Kyuubi, and this guy seemed to be one of the main people to want to use it. Forgive me for interrupting you, Naruto-san, but I would like to have a word with you, Danzo said, and Naruto's glare increased before he silently sighed and nodded. He stood to his feet and told Samui that he would be back in a minute. Naruto and Danzo came to a quiet corner while the blonde folded his arms. How may I help you, Danzo-san? Naruto asked in an icy tone that Danzo noticed. He nodded and got straight to the point. Yes, I would like to speak with you about yourself, Samui-san, and those other people who came here to sign for a special task force that I am putting together, Danzo said, and Naruto glared. He closed his eyes and tapped his arm. A task force, huh? For what? Naruto asked, and Danzo smirked as he figured that he had gotten Naruto interested. It's a special force that will be under my command. Naturally, you will still be under Sarutobi's official command, but I am like your sensei in a sense. I will oversee the operations and you will do the work that I tell you, Danzo said, and Naruto snorted. Yeah, I'm going to say that you didn't run this by Gigi. If he approves, then I have no issues about it, but we both know that's not what you really want. One Ryu, Hayate, and the others aren't going to join, so you can stop that. Look, are we done? I'd rather not keep Samui-chan waiting, Naruto said, and he saw Danzo just snort before he bowed. Right. Sorry for disturbing you, he said before he walked away, and Naruto reclaimed his seat next to Samui. What did he want? Samui asked her new husband, and Naruto just gave a heavy sigh and shook his head. Nothing important, Samui-chan, I promise, Naruto said, and Samui just stared for a little bit before nodding. She would get her answers a little later, or Naruto would tell her. Either way, she wouldn't discuss it with him right now. It was their day and they wouldn't ruin it. The entire reception went on without a hitch, and the rest of Konoha was up in festival lights for the two blondes, but as with all weddings, then there is the ending that had finally come for them both. Naruto took Samui home for the final time today and waved goodbye to others. With Naruto and Samui, Naruto sighed as he opened the door and dragged Samui inside. Samui walked up the stairs before Naruto stopped her. He grabbed her arm, and much to Samui's surprise, he spun her and captured her lips into another kiss, one that seemed to last for quite a while this time. Samui blissfully sighed and submitted herself to her new husband and allowed her hands to roam his torso. Both didn't realize the danger of this still being on the stairs, but they didn't really care. Naruto pushed his tongue into Samui's mouth, making her hot from top to bottom. Pretty soon, Samui gently pushed Naruto back, much to the blonde's confusion of his wife, and wondered if he had offended or rushed her in any way, and was ready to apologize before he saw Samui's, usually, cold eyes light up in desire as she turned around. Not here. Just be cool and wait for a few minutes, Naruto-kun. We've been in these clothes all day. We should take a shower first, Samui suggested, and Naruto nodded. They went up the stairs and opened the door to the master bedroom. Naruto allowed Samui to go first, and she did so. She closed the door to the bathroom while Naruto sat on the bed, obviously nervous. He was wondering why Nibi and Kyuubi were so silent, but he chalked that up to them having their own night to themselves, so he didn't disturb them. Shortly, Samui did come out, and Naruto took his own shower. The warm water trailed down his body while he just continued to lean against the door. He would be lying if he said that he didn't outright desire Samui. What man can't desire his wife? During a few of their sessions, it had gotten heated to quite a few points, but either Naruto or Samui stopped it from going too far, wanting to experience that for today. So they had held off, and it was really frustrating for the two of them. However, both had long since been taught how to control urges. Samui did by reading in the Namikaze Jutsu library, and Naruto did by training and seeing Tenka and Mikomi. Oh, that's right. Naruto had indeed introduced Samui to Tenka and Mikomi mainly because Samui said that she could hear the faint sound of roars at nighttime. Not wanting his fiancée to have a bad encounter with the two fiends, Naruto decided to let Samui see both Tenka and Mikomi. Her first impression of them was confusion. She had turned to Naruto for an explanation and the blonde did provide it, telling her everything that went down in Ryu's world that he had been a part of. Needless to say, but when Samui had learned all of this, she had said that Naruto was going to be looking after them. However, Naruto was sure to give her a clear difference of Tenka and Mikomi as partners to pets. Something that Samui had readily understood. Also, as luck would have it, just like Tenka and Naruto, Samui and Mikomi bonded. While Mikomi was more comfortable around Naruto than Samui, she still never did anything uncomfortable with Samui. They were just good friends. Alright, I guess it's time that I get out too, Naruto said with a heavy sigh escaping his lips. He turned the handle for the water off and quickly dried his body. He walked out of the door and he noticed Samui sitting at the edge of the bed calmly waiting for him. Naruto sat next to her and a silence ensured over the house. A few seconds felt like hours to the two blondes before Naruto spoke. Samui-chan, I love you. This is our wedding night. I wanted to share this with you. You said that it had more meaning to wait and I agree. I just want you to know that I won't hurt you, Naruto said, and Samui responded by leaning her head to Naruto's shoulder. I know. I am just nervous. All people are at some point. I know you wouldn't hurt me. It's just a leap for me. One that I want to take with you. Do you? Samui asked and Naruto gently touched Samui's stray hand. Today, tomorrow, and every other day Dadbayo, Naruto answered with a smile and Samui just nodded her head in turn. Naruto quickly brought Samui back into a soft kiss of their laps. He could feel a sweet and savory feeling that came from them. Something that had to do with his arousal, but he didn't care. He had loved her and she wanted to take that extra mile with him. He wasn't one to let her down. He wouldn't do that to her. Naruto's hand trailed up the side of kimono and rested on her shoulder. Samui always liked massages as best Naruto could figure, so he gently massaged her left arm, which was something Samui took notice of even as their lips continued. The kiss, however, was Samui's most current pleasure as she blissfully sighed again. She and Naruto opened their mouths and their tongues danced together in harmony. Samui hadn't spoke it, but Naruto could pick up that she was a very good kisser. Everything she did followed a glorious rhythm that was close to her pace. Samui's hand raised up and softly touched Naruto's cheek tenderly. All her life she had been sort of cold to most people, even her friends. She distanced herself, but Naruto actually warmed her. She still had her cold personality, which was something Naruto liked, but she learned to let go and relax, if only for a while. Naruto and Samui slowly separated from each other's lips and panted while trying to catch their breath before the two stared at each other lovingly and quickly followed through again. Education wasn't a must in Shinobi Academy. It was one of those things that was probably not needed for genin their age, as most teachers figured that parents would explain it to their kids. That's just how Naruto learned and how Samui learned. Well, the latter learned it with a push from Yugito saying that it was a positive that she do it. Naruto had, much to Kurenai's chagrin, learned from Anko and Samui learned from Mabui. Now they were both happy that they did. Samui then felt her body slowly lean back and she noticed Naruto beginning to push her slowly and gently to the bed. She landed easily with Naruto on top as they continued to kiss. Her arms and hands went up and roamed his broad back, admiring the firm figure that he had despite being in a t-shirt and shorts. She moved her leg up slightly and sighed again before Naruto suddenly broke the kiss. Samui didn't whimper at the loss, but Naruto could tell that she longed to have his lips soon. Samui-chan, you're so beautiful, Naruto said, and there was something in the way that he said it that made Samui's face glow a tint of pink. She then watched as Naruto raised his hands and placed them on her kimono. He looked up at her for one last confirmation and Samui just closed her eyes and nodded. Naruto, seeing the approval, moved back down and quickly undid the sash around Samui's kimono. He slipped it off her while still admiring the said aura that exuded from her body. Naruto's breath hitched at each turn as his fingers continued to undress his wife. It was like he completely wanted to savor the moment in front of him. The sash quickly dropped to the floor and Naruto gulped as he opened her kimono. The sight that greeted him was one that would always be burned into his head. Samui was completely underneath her kimono. No bra or panties were shown on it, telling Naruto that she wanted nothing to try and hinder him. Naruto snapped out of his stupor and placed one of his hands over Samui's left. He watched her suddenly suck in her breath and softly chuckled before he quickly captured one into his mouth, setting a new pace for Samui and himself. His tongue trailed over Samui's tit while his other hands placed and squeezed with the other and its. He could hear Samui's soft moans as her left hand rested on the mop of his hair and her right was used to cover her moans. "You are perfect, Samui-chan. Let me hear your voice," Naruto said as he continued to play with his wife's. Big for her age, but a definite plus. The cute areoles of her tit came into view, showing her arousal. Samui had heard Naruto's request and took her hand from her mouth. "Oh Naruto. It feels weird, but good," Samui said, and Naruto smiled with a nod of his head before he playfully bit Samui's, getting her to arch back, but not too much as this was set to Naruto's pace and he liked feeling in control. However, he knew that Samui would have her own revenge. Like him, she was just unpredictable. Naruto stopped sucking her and quickly trailed his tongue down her soft, flat stomach, savoring the taste of her body. A body that was his to enjoy to his delight and pleasure. Naruto leaned off the bedside and knelt to the floor. Samui's face was flushed and her body heated up from the pleasure while she threw her head back while her soft moans echoed through the room as Naruto kissed and licked her thighs and legs. No deformities on her. She was so clean that the light enhanced her skin even though it was low already. Soon Naruto stopped his ministrations and he noticed how wet Samui was. A lush and pink color slowly dripping from her juices. Naruto licked his lips and Samui felt the urge to hide herself from the view of her husband, but she withheld that. She had nothing to hide from him. After all, she was married to him. The time seemed to slow and Samui had noticed that Naruto wasn't doing anything. She was about to say something before her breath hitched and she threw her head back. "Oh Kami. Naruto, what are you?" Samui suddenly as her chest rose and fell from the sudden pleasure of Naruto's mouth latching onto her spot and licking it around. Samui's breath immediately picked up as she arched back in pleasure while Naruto kept his arms firmly around her legs. His tongue swirled around and drove inside her spot, quickly licking the juices that fell out into his open mouth. Naruto. "Oh ugh gghghhhh. Why you're, oh moving too fast Samui said as she raised and lowered her hips. She didn't outright scream, but she was definitely pleased at the attention that Naruto was giving her. She had never felt like this before. Nor had she ever thought she would get to experience this from anyone. Naruto grinned at her words before he suddenly got a gleam in his eye and Samui felt herself shudder at what Naruto might be thinking. Naruto closed his eyes quickly and gathered his chakra. He then opened his eyes, showing the slits while he pushed his snake-like tongue through Samui's hole, getting further than any human tongue could while Samui arched back again. "Ouggghghn Naruto, how did you just? Oh, it's slippery," Samui said while Naruto's tongue continued to swirl around inside her hole, causing Samui to feel an endless amount of pleasure. Hearing her words, Naruto quickly sped up and even used his middle finger to pleasure her thatch. Samui's breath grew ragged while she sighed in bliss. She only had the time to react to the kiss that Naruto had decided to get while his fingers played with her hole. "Samui-chan, you're so wet. Your lips are so soft. You like this, don't you?" Naruto asked, but Samui didn't answer. She just let her body gravitate to Naruto's movements as they continued to kiss. Her blonde face showed the sweat protruding down her form along the open kimono underneath her body. Seeing all of this really got Naruto aroused as Samui could feel his hardness along her thigh. She would have her own fun, but first is first. Ugh, oh, Naruto. Just a minute. Oh god. Samui gripped the sheets of the bed and separated from Naruto's own lips before he went back down and continued to lick Samui's spot before she arched back and grunted, signaling to Naruto her release as her juices flooded into his mouth. Naruto widened his eyes slightly as he felt like he could drown from this, but he quickly drank it all, and when he felt Samui was finished, he backed away while she slumped to the ground huffing continuously. Naruto chuckled and wiped his cheek of anything he missed. He then leaned up and kissed Samui on the cheek, getting a small rise from her. "I'm glad you enjoyed yourself," Naruto said, and Samui glanced up at him, Her face still red from her little session before she grabbed Naruto's hand and in a quick motion trapped him to the bed much to his surprise while she straddled him. So you think it's cool to try and make me moan to you? Samui asked and Naruto just smiled while she responded with a quick kiss. She didn't really care that she could taste herself, but she was fine with it. It might be something that she would grow accustomed to. You just seemed so cute when I did that, Naruto said and Samui tapped his t-shirt aimlessly while she thought something over before glaring back. Then allow me to return the favor to you, she said and her delicate hands quickly grabbed the folds of Naruto's t-shirt as she lifted it over his head and threw it to the floor. She could see the years of training across his form. A built stomach, built arms and a firm jawline. A very handsome young man to be desired by women alike. However, Samui would only ever allow xAyane such a thing, but to even think of that, Samui would need to fight her. See just how much of an influence this kunoichi had over her husband, but that could wait. Samui kissed Naruto's lips while her hands roamed his form allowing her to take into detail all of his body. The two then parted and Samui kissed Naruto gently while using one of her hands to slowly push Naruto to the bed which he followed her instructions. Her thin fingers trailed around his stomach where Kyuubi and Nibi resided. She gave it a quick kiss which made the two Biju who had been watching secretly smile to each other and merely jump at each other's bones right then and there, but neither Naruto nor Samui knew about it. Samui rubbed her hand over Naruto's hardened through his boxers getting a low groan from him before she slipped her hand through and took a hold of it. She shuddered slightly at his size. She had studied human anatomy and this was exceptional for his age. She wondered just what her first time would be like if this was with her. She quickly took off his boxers and knelt down. She looked at Naruto's hardened muscle and felt her body tremble though she didn't show it. She grabbed it again and quickly moved her hand up and down in experimentation while she turned to Naruto who looked more than a little aroused. Content with his reaction, Samui moved her hand a little faster over Naruto's while Naruto groaned his approval. Samui might have prided herself on Naruto's reaction as she hadn't done this before. She then gave it a soft lick with her tongue while Naruto flinched. Kami Samui-chan, that felt amazing, Naruto said and Samui just looked up before giving a small smile and she quickly licked Naruto's again trailing it up and down sending Naruto into some type of bliss while his breath hitched again. He then felt something really went and groaned loudly as Samui took his entire length in his mouth and slowly bobbed her head up and down. Oh god. Damn Samui-chan, you're amazing. Ugh, Naruto said as Samui continued. She didn't stop and she controlled her gag reflex. It wasn't anything too difficult for her at the moment. She just continued to suck Naruto off while one of her hands followed her mouth's movement as it slid up and down his shaft. Naruto moaned aloud while his hands rested over Samui's head allowing her to do what she wanted. He had his turn and now she would. She then popped it out of her mouth and gave one more lick before speaking. I'm not very experienced so is it good? Samui asked with uncertainty and Naruto smiled. It's great Samui-chan. It's the best I've had, and not that I ever had one before, but I mean it's the Naruto sighed and rubbed the back of his head while Samui snickered. She closed her eyes and nodded. I know what you mean. Thank you, Samui said and she continued again taking Naruto's breath away while she continued to work on his hot rod. She could feel it reach the back of her throat a few times, but that was because she tried to get it that way. Samui always did like trying new things and this might as well be one of them. She could feel Naruto buck his hips a few times and she didn't really mind it so long as it was at a controlled pace that she liked. Samui-chan, do you mind if I make a request? Naruto asked and Samui stopped for a few minutes. She wasn't sucking him off, but her hand was still moving keeping him hard. The way he looked at her lustfully turned her on slightly and she wondered about this request of her husband. Very well. What is it? She asked and Naruto scratched his cheek. He lowered himself to Samui's ear and whispered into it making the blonde's eyebrows slightly rise. She inwardly chuckled and shook her head while Naruto leaned back a little embarrassed. She slightly glared at him with her usually cold eyes, but Naruto could see that she was interested. And where did you learn this from? Samui asked and Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Ankone and Ero Sennin said that guys like it when a woman does that so I thought we could try it out, Naruto said and though Samui had already made her decision, she teased Naruto into thinking that she was contemplating it. Very well. If it will make you happy, Samui said, and she leaned up. Samui placed her over Naruto's and quickly smothered it while she allowed Naruto to buck his hips. He groaned in pleasure of her soft mounds against his hot rod, and Samui could feel the immense heat and friction of her lover's hardness against her large assets while she sucked the tip a few times. She bounced her tits up and down Naruto's while the blonde groaned his approval. How Samui was even single back in Kumo he didn't know. Any guy would kill to have this sort of treatment, but it was too late. She was Naruto's wife and only he got to enjoy her. Same could be said for her and xAyane. Samui had never done this before. Not even Yugito or Mabui had told her about it, but it felt good to her, making her even more aroused. She swirled her tongue over Naruto's tip while the blonde's breath hitched. "Oh God, Samui-chan, I'm gonna," Naruto warned, and Samui heard him. She just sped up faster with her motions, and Naruto groaned before he balled his fist and grunted, releasing his cum into her mouth. Samui widened her eyes to the sudden rush of white liquid, but she kept it hidden well. She then remembered what Naruto did for her and gulped it down. A salty taste, but nonetheless very good to her. She pulled back and a few shots went onto her chest while Naruto leaned back and huffed while Samui used a finger and swiped the cum off her face from Naruto's orgasm. She looked at it for a bit before shrugging and licking her finger clean, unknowingly giving Naruto an erotic sight. "Samui-chan," Naruto said as he grabbed Samui and pulled her to the bed while kissing her. They could both taste the mixture of each other in their mouths, and it only served to turn them on more. The air was filled with their arousal, and it was one of the reasons why Naruto had sent Mikata into the woods, which she didn't mind. Mikata loved the woods, especially at night since she could camouflage herself well. Naruto quickly aligned himself to Samui's spot, but stopped just mere inches. He glanced towards her and Samui placed a hand on his cheek while she slowly began to grind her lower half to his. Naruto sighed and he slowly pushed his into Samui's, getting a wince from her at his size. She balled her fists, but Naruto caught them and took a hold of each, allowing Samui to squeeze his hands as much as she needed. Naruto then leaned forward and kissed her to lessen the pain of having her virginity taken until he rested inside her. She was very slippery, but still kept a tight hold over him. Samui never felt so full of something in her life. It felt amazing to be connected to the one that she loved. "You can move now," she said, and Naruto nodded as he rocked his hips slowly inside her. He moved slow at first for her benefit as they set a steady pace, just enjoying the feeling of being connected to each other before the lust took over both of them. Naruto quickly plunged his hips fast and deep, hitting Samui's walls, getting a loud moan out of her as the sounds of skin slapping became apparent. "Oh Naruto. Oh God. I can feel you inside me. It's hot and uggggghhhh amazing. I love you Naruto," Samui said while Naruto nodded. "I love you too Samui. This is amazing for me also," Naruto said, and Samui's moan rang through the place from their lovemaking. Naruto then, feeling a little bold, quickly rolled Samui over and placed her on her knees and arms before he pistoned faster inside her, getting another moan out of Samui for the action and position that followed. Naruto could see her flail around before he grabbed them and played with them while his tongue trailed over her neck. "Oh God. Oh God. Oh God. Oh God. Ugh Naruto. Why you're so rough," Samui said, and Naruto took that as a compliment to his performance. Samui turned her body and wrapped her arm around Naruto's neck for a little leverage as he continued to pound into her, granting Samui a much better pleasure than the last. "Oh Samui-chan, you are the best. Ah damn, I'm getting close," Naruto said as a warning, and he knew she was nearing her second orgasm as well since she was trying to really tighten her hips. He then twisted and fell to the bed while Samui quickly assumed control and raised her hips before sinking them down, allowing Naruto to see his appear and disappear all the same. She then leaned over and kissed him before they felt each other. They screamed in unison as Naruto's cum flooded Samui's and her juices ran along the length of his. Both felt their toes curl, but they dropped from their high and fell to the bed huffing. Samui fell to Naruto's chest, and as soon as she could catch her breath she spoke. "That was amazing. I'm glad we waited," Samui said, and Naruto nodded. He wrapped his hands around Samui's waist and smiled. "Me too. It held a lot more meaning, didn't it?" Naruto asked, and Samui nodded her head. She then flinched as Naruto began to rock his hips into her again, catching his second wind. "Haven't had enough, have you?" she asked, and Naruto shook his head. "You know me. Always Mr. Energetic." It's the man you married, he said, and Samui agreed before she kissed him again, and both blondes quickly picked up where they left off. Outside the house, Jiraiya chuckled with his telescope through the window as he jotted down notes to his notepad. This was gold, pure gold. The very next Ika edition. And he had a front row seat. Best thing. Tsunade was drunk from the party in the village and wouldn't be making any guest appearances. Oh, the kid is a gold mine. I knew he was paying attention when I told him about this stuff, Jiraiya said before he felt a large key over his body. So you think my son is worthy of being in your little books, do you? Kurenai asked, glaring daggers at Jiraiya, making the man shiver. He flinched at her ice-cold tone, and he didn't have to turn around to know that she was glaring so coldly at him that he might be freezing. I was just making sure that Naruto didn't screw up. I worry about him, Jiraiya said while Kurenai merely folded her arms, taking a step closer. Is that right? Then you can worry about him while I take you to Sarutobi-sama's office, Kurenai said, and she was about to grab him before. ROOOOOOOOAAAARRRRR. Kurenai and Jiraiya widened their eyes to the loud roar that came from the forest behind them. They both figured it was a large animal, but they could see something moving down there, and Kurenai glared. It was something surrounded by the earth walls behind it. Whatever it was, Naruto was aware of it and had it around. However, seeing his chance, Jiraiya shunshined away, but Kurenai quickly followed him, not letting some animal's roar get in the way of her achieving her righteous fury on the Toad Sage, while Naruto and Samui continued to enjoy each other. End. With Ayane. Ayane quickly came to the balcony of the hotel that she and her friends were staying at. Shiden had called her up to it for some kind of talk, but she didn't know what it would be a talk about. Unless it was something mission related, then Ayane never really heard anything from him. Which she could understand because of her biological father, Rado. The guy still pissed her off to no end. Ayane opened the upper door and she noticed Shiden calmly sitting on a mat looking at the moon. She knew he didn't have to turn around to know it was her. He was good enough to do that, or else he wouldn't be their clan head. Ayane saluted her uncle and fell to one knee. You wanted to speak with me? Ayane asked professionally, and Shiden narrowed his eyes. He looked up at the moon before he slowly got up and nodded, turning around. That's right. Ayane. Would you follow all of my orders? Shiden asked, and Ayane raised an eyebrow at the question. She didn't really have to think about it, so she answered. Hi, she said, and Shiden couldn't resist the small smirk on his face. He was really about to test that little yes of her with this next order. Good. Then kill Naruto Uzumaki, Shiden said, and Ayane immediately flinched. She widened her red eyes at the ground at such an order. Her legs felt weak and her face shivered. Why? Ayane asked, as she wasn't ready to accept that order. She had to have a reason. Did Naruto do something? No, he couldn't have. He was almost always around her and she had stayed with him. They kissed. She felt happy around him. He couldn't have done something. No, not him. You ask me why? The old Ayane would have just done what I asked. You said that you would follow my orders without question. Kill Naruto Uzumaki, Shiden said, and Ayane remained unmoving. Shiden glared at her before he advanced on her. Each step felt like a huge stomp on her world at what he was requesting of her. Yes, the shinobi life wasn't pleasant and sacrifices were going to happen, but to outright kill someone she had come to enjoy having around, for no reason. It couldn't be done. I am sorry, Shiden-sama, but I cannot follow that order, Ayane said, and Shiden glared. Ayane, hesitantly, looked up and saw his unwavering glare. She felt so small under it, but she stood fast for it. And you say that you want to be the leader of the Hajinmon sect? Those who can't follow orders are traitors. Are you a traitor, Ayane? Shiden asked. Ayane gulped and shook her head left and right, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. If she did, then her humanity be damned. She wouldn't have it anymore. I'm not traitor to you, Shiden-sama, but I refuse to accept that mission. I will not do it. You know of my dream to be the leader of the Hajinmon sect. It was my greatest wish that I accomplish in my life. I wanted people to recognize how hard I had worked. How far I had come from being just the cursed child that everyone thought, but I have come to a conclusion. To hell with all of them, Ayane said, and Shiden raised an eyebrow. Ayane sighed and stood to her feet. I don't need their acknowledgement. I know I'm a good shinobi. Kasumi knows it. Hayate knows it. Mother knows it. Ryu-sama knows it. But most importantly to me, Naruto knows it. I will never be a traitor to our village, but I will not be a traitor to Naruto for all he's done. He's helped Ryu-sama with the Dark Dragon Blade, he's strong and I trust him myself. I'm sorry, but anything dealing with Naruto then I can't do it, much less kill him under your orders, Ayane said, and Shiden drew a sword and aimed at Ayane's throat, making her shiver. Is that your final say? He asked, and Ayane closed her eyes and submitted her fate. It is, she spoke, and Shiden continued to look at her. He glared evenly at her for a little while and saw that she was more than ready to give up her life if it meant that she wouldn't be the one to kill Naruto. Shiden still glared until he noticed a band fall off Ayane's wrist. It was the same band that Naruto gave her during the Land of Iron tournament. The very same band that marked their friendship and rivalry. It was more important to her than anything. She never took it off except for sleep. Same could be said for Naruto. Unless he was sleeping or somewhere else unimportant, then he never took off Ayane's headband. It was always somewhere on his body. It had even been on his body at his wedding, but no one could see it. She meant that much to him. Shiden withdrew his blade and smiled as he turned around to look at the moon. He just nodded and sighed. And so the moon shines its light down on the ones that hold to their truth. So do the winds of change shift when a person holds to their ideals even in the face of death. It is as I thought. Open your eyes, Ayane, Shiden said, and Ayane did indeed open them. Shiden walked forward a little before he turned around. I'm glad that you've learned. That is right. No one else's opinion matters so long as you hold to what you believe to be right. Ayane, I can feel it around you. You want to stay here, Shiden said, and Ayane just looked at the ground, non-responsive. In light of new things, she did want to stay, but she still had obligations, things that had to be done in her world. She couldn't just up and leave. I do feel a strong connection here, but I can't just up and leave. I'm not a registered shinobi of this village. I doubt it would be in the Mugen Tenshin clan's best interest if Ayane trailed off while Shiden smirked. As of right now, the Mugen Tenshin clan is of no concern to you. As your leader, I am ordering you to stay here. You will stay as a Konoha kunoichi. You will show this world the power of Mugen Tenshin. Your clothes and things will be delivered by next week. Am I understood? Shiden asked in a tone that left no room for argument. Ayane just stayed silent for a bit before she bowed and formed a light grin. Hi Shiden-sama, if it is your wish then I will stay here, Ayane said as she got up, spun on her heel and left with a small smile on her face. Seeing her leave, Shiden shook his head and sighed again. Too much pride in that girl to admit that she truly does want to stay. She's never defied me until today. Naruto Yuhi Uzumaki, you are a wonder, Shiden said before he looked back up at the moon and its glimmering light. With Naruto. Naruto opened his eyes to the darkness around him and sighed as he tried to get up, but he noticed something on him and looked with a smile to see Samui and Content. They were both very tired and had reason to be, but Naruto needed to get something and it couldn't wait. So the blonde got up from the bed and adjusted Samui so she didn't wake up and continued to walk down the stairs. He went into the living room and was about to unseal his kidetsu from a scroll before a poof came next to him. It was Taro. Hey Taro, what's up? Anything new? Naruto asked and Taro dropped a scroll into his hands. Nah, nothing really. Gaia and Makata are still hanging around somewhere in the forest. I don't know where, but it's hell if I care. I received the scroll from Pakura-san. She wants you to respond as fast as possible, Taro said, and Naruto nodded, feeling the urgency as he flicked on the light and sat on the couch. He unfurled the scroll and read along it. To Headmaster. This is Pakura of the network, but you would know that. Anyway, Maki and I have arrived within Otogakure and we are currently looking around. I hope you are sitting down as I have a few things to report. I would like to begin with the additions of our network. I do realize that you have instructed us to act with the most discretion possible, but while I was in Taki I looked around and Maki has befriended the Nanabi Jinchuriki, Fu, and we have revealed to her our network. She has joined and I am keeping her in my sights. I hope you do not worry so much. Also Suna is looking for Maki as they have placed her in the bingo book. It was a message received to us from Gaara and his siblings. The council is ordering shinobi to come after Maki, and I believe that I know why. She seems to hold a bloodline, one that is similar to the Sandaime Kazekage of Suna. He was renowned for his use of Jiten as well as the use of Satetsu iron sand. Maki had displayed some of these abilities. I am unsure of what to do, but I will figure something out. Also Tayuya has informed me of 2 new members. Momochi Zabuza and Haku Momochi. I do not know how they have come, but Tayuya says that they are beneficial. What are your orders, sir? Pakura. Naruto read through the note and sighed as he leaned back into the chair. Maki having a bloodline just like the Sandaime Kazekage really shocked Naruto, but no more than hearing about Fu did as well. He was happy that another Jinchuriki was known to him and he could save them, if not then Pakura was there. She was the most experienced at things like this, even above Naruto in some areas. Still, she wanted his orders so he would give them to her. Besides, he had to bring them all together, so why not now? He could get them together at the Taki hideout and hand them a new improved seal. Naruto jotted down his orders to everyone in the network currently except for Alma. She wouldn't be able to make it and Naruto knew that for a fact, so he didn't bother, but he did send her a quick hello note just to make sure that she was alright. He then finished and handed it to Taro, who poofed out to the next people to get the note. Naruto then sighed and stood to his feet. He turned off the light and went back upstairs, forgetting what it was he wanted to do. With Maki. Maki finished her exercises and just snorted at nothing to do. She looked around the entire room, but the sleeping girl wasn't waking up from what she could see. So she just continued to work before she had an idea. It made her anxious to even try to see it again, but she just pushed that anxiety down. It was because she was anxious that she was afraid of it, but if it helped her then it couldn't be all bad. Maki breathed easily and closed her eyes. She concentrated her chakra and her dark rings formed around her eyes as she held out her hand. She noticed her hand glowing with chakra before she noticed black sand coming into the room. She kept calm and watched as the sand came together. Maki looked at it and raised her hand and the black sand flowed into the air, swirling around to her desire. Wow, the only thing this looks like is the jutsu of Sandaime Sama. He had the weapon of iron sand. We learned about it in the academy, Maki thought to herself before the sand turned into a dagger to her will. She held it in her hand before her eyes returned to normal and the sand broke apart. Maki sighed and shook her head at her weird abilities before she heard a moan. She turned around and noticed the orange-haired girl stir finally. She opened her eyes and they darted around the room in a panic before they rested on the form of Maki. Hi, my name is Maki. Who are you? She asked the newly awakened girl. With Pakura. Pakura pulled out a slip of paper and handed it to Fu. The Nanabi Jinchuriki looked at the paper with confusion in her voice while Pakura took out another piece of paper. This is known as chakra paper. It will tell you your affinity. If you have earth, it will crumble. Water, it will drip wet. Fire, it will burst into flames. Wind, it will slice in half. Lightning, it will crinkle. Don't worry, once we know your nature then we can begin. Go for it, Pakura encouraged and Fu nodded nervously. She hoped that she would get something good. She quickly changed her chakra through it and waited for a few seconds. Soon the paper split in half and Fu smiled before it changed to confusion for her and Pakura as one half started to drip and the other crinkled. Pakura raised an eyebrow while Fu turned to her for an explanation. So you have 3 affinities. That's quite unusual. Even the higher shinobi only have 2. Like myself. My Shikuden is a combination of fire and lightning. Impressive Fu. While I don't know much in the way of Suiten techniques, I still know a few Raiden and quite a few Futon techniques. Yeah, this will work just fine, Pakura said and Fu nodded happily before Pakura's eyes darted to the left. You can come out now. She shouted and both were amazed to see a pale teen come out of the trees. He landed to the ground and glared at them both. He carefully walked up to them and while Pakura knew he wasn't much of a threat in terms of skill, she still had to be careful as Fu was with her. Who are you and what do you want? Pakura asked, but she had a pretty good idea of who this guy was. No, that was wrong, she had a good idea of what he wanted from her. My name is Kimimaro and you are both to present yourselves to Orochimaru-sama at once. If you don't I will be forced to take action and bring you to him, Kimimaro said and Pakura glared evenly at him before she moved Fu behind her. And what does a traitorous snake want with my group? Pakura asked and Kimimaro glared. I wasn't informed. You will know when you come. I will not ask again, Kimimaro said, getting ready for a fight if he had to. Pakura glared while Fu did the same. They were all ready to strike before a poof came next to Pakura. She looked down and noticed it was Taro. Sorry, I gotta take this, she said, and Kimimaro relaxed. He still gave them a cold glare, but he didn't attack. Soon Taro poofed out and Pakura read through the scroll of Naruto's orders and nodded to herself before placing it away. Sorry, but we have somewhere to be. Maybe some other time, she said as she and Fu turned to leave before they noticed a bone spear stab the tree next to them. Then I will have to use for on you both. You will come to Orochimaru-sama, Kimimaro said, and he charged at them both. Pakura sighed and quickly placed Fu behind her. She flashed through some hand signs and, not wanting to fight, decided to just make a break for it back to the house. Shikuden. Nikyogakure no Jutsu, Scorch Release. Hiding in the sun technique, Pakura shouted as she formed a large fireball over the area. Its light shined brightly, making Kimimaro stop to cover his eyes as it covered their forms. It soon dispersed and Kimimaro noticed that he was completely alone and even their chakra signatures were gone. Orochimaru-sama is not going to be pleased with this, Kimimaro said to himself before he rushed off through the woods to try and find Pakura and Fu. With Pakura and Fu, Pakura opened and closed the door while Fu huffed lightly. Both were back in their apartment and both noticed Maki sitting at the table having tea with the now awake young female. Pakura-sensei, is something the matter? Maki asked and Pakura collected herself and stood to her feet. We were found by Orochimaru, but I expected that. One of their spies had seen what Maki did to save the girl and apparently we have caught his interest while Maki growled. We can't go to him. He's the reason that Suna is in debt to Konoha. It was him who. Maki stopped as Pakura patted her on the head. I know, Maki. I know, so don't worry. Now then, who is this? Pakura asked, turning to the girl who bowed to them all. Hello. I'm Sasama Fuma. Thank you for rescuing me. I know you didn't have to, but I appreciate it, she said, and Pakura nodded. It was nothing. Do you have anywhere to go? The older shinobi asked and Sasama shook her head left and right while Pakura sighed. I see. Well then you can stay with us. Why don't you get washed up and we'll see about dinner, Pakura said, and Sasama nodded before she got up and quickly walked away into the bath. Meanwhile Pakura sat down and called for Fu to sit down also. We have new orders. In 1 week's time we will be going back to Taki, and our little hideout. Fu, this will be your first time seeing our spy master, so make sure to be respectful, or not if he doesn't care. He's not really the type, Pakura said, and Fu nodded. With Gaara and his siblings. The 3 shinobi were all sitting in the trees getting some sleep, well 2 of them were. Gaara stayed awake to think about things with the council. The investigation to Maki just confused him. He had hoped to see her and acquire some answers, but if even she didn't know, then what was the point? Gaara soon turned his head and he noticed Taro looking at him. Taro bowed and dropped Gaara a scroll before he poofed out. Gaara unfurled the scroll and read through it. Orders from his Jinchuriki in arms, Naruto Yuhi Uzumaki. Gaara narrowed his eyes and before long he seemed content. Looks like he would get his answers after all. Tamari yawned and rubbed her eyes as she saw Gaara still awake and looking at the moon. Gaara, hey, what is it? Tamari asked and Gaara just turned to her. He then looked back at the moon and snorted. Get your rest, Tamari. We are going to Taki at dawn. Maki and the others will be there, Gaara said, and Tamari widened her eyes before she merely nodded her head and fell back asleep, taking Gaara's orders into consideration. Gaara just continued to stare at the moon in morbid curiosity. With Tayuya and Kin. Tayuya shunshine to the ground at an underground abandoned Kiri facility and rubbed her neck with a heavy sigh escaping her lips. Right behind her was Kin, who had requested a break from the store owner. Hey, are you here? Tayuya all but shouted and she heard a suck of teeth as Zabuza and Haku appeared. Kin managed a wave to Haku and the girl waved back. Geez, just alert the entire Kiri squad to us. What the do you care? Zabuza asked while Tayuya rolled her eyes. Hey, you're tough. Just man the up, she said before Kin patted her shoulder, easing the tension between the two while Haku did the same. Sorry about that. We just came to ask if you had anything to report, Kin said, and Zabuza folded his arms. When I agreed to this little network, it was for the simple purpose that you said I could overthrow the Mizukage with the Resistance's help. Yes, they are helpful, especially my old friend, Meitarumi, but this is almost taking too long. Do you even have any idea how hard it is to get away from it? Zabuza asked while Kin bowed. What Zabuza-sama is saying is that we like the network, but it's hard to keep face unless we're together. So what did you need? Haku asked and Tayuya shook her head. It's not what we need, it's what you need. Tell your leader that the Mizukage is ordering his militia to the front lines soon. It seems that he's ready to put a final end to you once and for all. You have been locked in this war for a long time. If you're ever going to attack, then you need to do it now, Tayuya said while Zabuza grabbed the hilt of his sword. Haku merely nodded before everyone heard a poof and saw Taro on the ground. Kin knelt down and took the scroll that was wrapped around his body and Taro bowed before he left. How come we never get his messages? Zabuza asked childishly while Haku snickered. Kin picked up the note and showed it to Tayuya. She glared at it slightly and sighed. Well, for one, the seal won't work unless the person who made the seal does it. It's not mine. It's just to mimic one that you are in until he sees you. Which might be very soon, Tayuya said, and Zabuza narrowed his eyes. Kin handed them the scroll and both looked it over. Haku raised an eyebrow while Zabuza snorted. Well, it's about damn time, I should say, Zabuza said to himself with a small snicker across his face. With Naruto. One day later. Naruto folded his arms while Samui placed 4 cups of tea onto the coffee table in front of their couch. She then bowed and sat down next to Naruto before the 2 people across from them picked up the cups and took a quick drink while Naruto spoke. So you're related to my mother. You only came back to Konoha for supplies, is that right? Naruto asked Tsunade with Shizune sitting next to her. The slug princess nodded her head, though she wondered if she had been slacking off. This blonde's cold glare had really settled uneasily with her. He really was Kurenai's son after all. Yeah, that's right. I wanted you to know that I didn't know about you until very recently. It was something that I had always wondered about with Kushina and Minato, but I didn't take the effort to look into it. I would like to apologize for that. I can't begin to understand the life you lived, but Tsunade stopped as Naruto raised a hand. The past is the past. I won't look to it anymore. Ero Sennin told me about your circumstances and I acknowledge them. However, in all honesty, I want to be mad at you, Naruto said bluntly, causing Tsunade to flinch. Shizune's eyes darted left and right between the 2 blonde before she noticed Samui just calmly drinking her own tea with her eyes closed, but she was listening to the conversation. I want to be mad at you for not being there when I was sure you could have. I want to really be mad at that, but Ka-chan trained me better than that and I know where I stand with you currently. It's up to you if you want anything more. I won't go looking for your attention, but I want us to at least try to work on our relationship. If it means anything to you, Naruto said, and Tsunade nodded, not missing a beat. If there is anything that I can do, then I will do it, but I just want to tell you that I realize my mistakes and I realize that I failed a crucial responsibility. It was my fault, Tsunade said, and Naruto just sighed. Forget it. Like I said, the past can't be changed and I bear no complete hatred for you. You did what you had to and we'll do what we need to. Simple as that, right? Naruto asked and Tsunade nodded. Both got up and gave each other a quick hug. Shizune smiled and Samui placed her teacup down while a grin came across her face. The 2 relatives parted from each other and Tsunade stood to her feet. I guess I will stick around. Someone's gotta look out for you, cheeky brat, Tsunade said before she took Shizune and the 2 left the room. Naruto and Samui glanced to each other before sighing and shaking their heads. It would be interesting in Konoha now. Konohagakure. 4 days later. Platoon 13 was absolutely floored as they looked in front of them. None of them had their Chunin flak jackets on since they didn't really care for them, but this was just incredible. Sasuke and Shikamaru were surprised while Naruto was floored. Samui seemed surprised, but she hid it very well. This was the chance she was waiting for, but to say that she was expecting it was very untrue. JJJGGG, is this some kind of a joke? Naruto asked and Sarutobi shook his head pointing to the person. 2 days ago. Platoon 13, meet your new teammate Ayane Tengu. She is the first of many shinobi of the Hayabusa village and Mugen Tenshin clan that will transfer from there to here for shinobi training. However, Under Shiden Dono's acceptance, Ayane has been made into a full Konoha shinobi. As Naruto knows of her skills, then she is Chunin ranked. She will be placed with your squad since she is most familiar with Naruto, Sarutobi said while Sasuke smirked. Cheating already, Naruto. Shame on you, Sasuke said before Naruto rolled his eyes, ignoring the Uchiha. Naruto just walked up to her in confusion. Ayane-chan, what about your dream? You wanted to be the leader of the Hajinmon sect, didn't you? You shouldn't abandon your dream like that, Naruto said, and Ayane just snorted and rolled her eyes. She opted to wear the headband around her arm like Shikamaru, and she proceeded to fold them while she walked up to Naruto. HMPH, don't think for 1 second that I have given up my ambition. I'm not going to become the true leader to the Hajinmon sect, so I will become its sub-leader. The sub-leader deals with Konoha as its shinobi, and I will be sending messages to Shiden-sama. Think of me as an ambassador of sorts, Ayane said, and Naruto just nodded while Ayane stepped a little closer and whispered. Besides, I still haven't finished my business with you, and I certainly plan on doing so, Ayane said, and Naruto felt a shiver go down his spine while Ayane walked over to and stood by Samui. The two exchanged a glare to each other before nodding and standing. Samui will still be the captain, and Naruto the sub-captain, but you are to still show Ayane-san the ropes, if she wants, Sarutobi said, and everyone else nodded before Naruto walked up to him. Gigi, do you have a mission relating to Taki? Naruto asked, and Sarutobi narrowed his eyes. Yes, I believe that I do, but what would you need from Taki? Sarutobi asked, and Naruto turned back to his friends before smiling and turning back. I need to gather information from some people, Naruto said, and Sarutobi glared. Spy network business, more than likely. It was discussed with Sarutobi and Jiraiya that Naruto could gather his network together for talks and such, but would have to run it by Sarutobi to approve it. Which he would always do, as anything would be helpful in the long run for Konoha. I see. Very well then. Platoon 13 will have its first mission to Taki. You will be delivering this scroll to their leader. It's a B rank mission, but with the 5 of you then there should be no problems, Sarutobi said, and everyone saluted him and bowed before they all left the room while Sarutobi smoked his pipe. Are you sure you won't take the job? Sarutobi asked Tsunade, who had been sitting there. She glared at Sarutobi and snorted. No way. I'd rather give up gambling. You know my history with that shit, Tsunade said, and Sarutobi smirked. Then how about a bet? He asked, and Tsunade's ears twitched. She folded her arms and turned to Sarutobi. Fine. What kind of bet? Tsunade asked, and Sarutobi grinned. Oh, you'll see, he said, and he left Tsunade wanting to know as she walked out of the room before casting one more glare at her old sensei before she quickly left. Sarutobi snickered as he realized that he just got her in his clutches. Now he just had to seal the deal completely. Alternate world, with Hayate. Hayate panted as he went to Kasumi and helped her to her feet. Both growled while the rain poured over them. Raida had come to attack the Mugen Tenshin clan. He would have looked forward to seeing his daughter, but she wasn't around, which confused him, but he could honestly care less. Weakling. How dare you, a shinobi of Mugen Tenshin, hide behind a woman? It is such a disgrace, Raida shouted at Hayate, who glared at him in rage. He stood to his feet and crackled his knuckles as he stood Raida down. Hayate, don't do it. Kasumi shouted while Hayate's hands lit up in lightning. Raida's hands did the same and he grinned before they both shouted. Haijutsu. Reku Jinpu Satsu, secret technique. Torn Sky Blast, they both shouted at the same time, and the lightning collided together, causing a massive energy to engulf the two while Kasumi looked on. Raida chuckled while Hayate sweated. As expected of his father's brother, he really was strong. Not bad, but not good enough. Raida shouted, and the blast exploded, sending Hayate flying through the ground before he slammed into a tree and gasped as his spine was injured, knocking him out into the ground. Kasumi widened her eyes and raced to Hayate's aid while Raida laughed. I finally have it. The Torn Sky Blast technique. Thank you Mugen Tenshin for this chance. Sayonara you fools, he said before he quickly vanished. Kasumi growled lowly before turning to her brother. Hayate. Hayate. Wake up. Wake up please. Hayate. Kasumi shouted as the tears rolled down her face. This wasn't a good day for the Mugen Tenshin clan. equals 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 omake. Meeting Tenka and Mikomi equals 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 equals. Kiba grumbled along with Neji and Ino, who had been tasked with a simple D-rank mission together. Why, you ask? Why, Kurenai had told Sarutobi about some weird roar coming from the back of Naruto's compound, so Sarutobi ordered Kiba, Ino and Neji to find out about it. Man, this sucks. Why do we have to do this shit? It's probably just some stupid animal, Ino said while Kiba nodded. Neji nodded also before they came up to the large and menacing-looking parallel stone pillars. Well, Kiba, go on. It's the funny ones who die first, Ino said while Kiba growled. Akamaru whimpered before Kiba smiled. Hey, come on, Akamaru. It'll be fine. We'll show them who is boss. Yahoo! Kiba shouted before he ran through woods and disappeared into the woods. Ino sighed and Neji shook his head at the terrible acts of their teammate. 10 minutes later. He's been gone a long time, Neji. Are you sure we shouldn't go and look for him? Ino asked, leaning against the wall while Neji just shrugged his shoulders, not really caring. He skipped a stone into a pond. Ah. Oh my god. Oh, god. Son of a bitch. Run for your lives. Kiba shouted as Ino and Neji jumped up to their feet. Both saw Kiba run out of the walls crying before Neji grabbed him. Get a hold of yourself, idiot. What's the matter? What did you see? Neji asked, but Kiba just shuddered. And no, don't go in there. It'll eat you alive. Run away. Mommy. Kiba shouted with Akamaru not far behind him as they both speed away. Geez, what's wrong with that idiot? Don't worry, Neji. I'll get through this, Ino said as she walked through. Neji just shrugged his shoulder and leaned against the wall. Ah, help. It's a monster. Run for your life. No, I don't wanna die. What the is that thing? Ino shouted as she ran and Neji could see some of her hair burning and the shoulder of her dress was ripped off as she sped away. Neji grumbled and figured that enough was enough of the shit. He looked at the large entrance and shrugged. What the is wrong with those two? What's so damn bad about a big, dumb, animal? R-O-O-O-O-O-O-O-O-A-A-A-A-A-R-R-R-R-R-R. Neji flinched and shiver quickly went through his spin. He shook his head and just pressed on before a huge fireball shot from the entrance and into a tree behind him. He widened his eyes in horror before he gulped. Well, everything checks out okay here. I guess I will just leave now. Yep. Fate has decreed that I not set foot into that place. There is no denying fate. Yep. I will just say that I saw nothing and leave it at that. Good looking out, Fate, Neji said as he walked away. The growling got bigger. He walked faster. It snarled. He jogged. It roared again. He flew off away from the house. To that day, it was the only D-rank mission that couldn't be completed by a genin team. Also the one day that the Neji Hyuga, of the Hyuga clan, cried.